Building Review Board. Let us begin by introducing the members of the board. I'm Lloyd Culbertson, representing the 4th Ward, and if the other members would introduce themselves, beginning to my left.
John Clare, 3rd Ward.
Maddie Dugan, 3rd Ward.
Peggy Vignacchi, 2nd Ward.
Monica Ruggles, 1st Ward.
Charlie King, 2nd Ward.
And would staff please introduce herself?
Kathy Cerniak, Director of Community Development.
The board is here tonight to work together with all of you, property owners, architects, neighbors, and interested citizens, to continue the long tradition that allows community members to work together to preserve the qualities and the unique character that make Lake Forest a special community. We recognize the personal importance of each petitioner's request. Our goal is to respect the request of the owner while balancing the interests of the community as a whole to preserve, complement, and enhance its architectural character and heritage. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Building Review Board, the types of projects that come before the board are those in which property owners are requesting a variance to allow a home that is larger than permitted by the code, are seeking a demolition permit for a replacement structure, or otherwise involve issues that could not be fully resolved with the city staff. It is important to note that over 95% of building permits are issued by the city without the need for any board review. Thus, the board typically deals with the most challenging and sometimes controversial projects. The City of Lake Forest is committed to conducting open and fair meetings. To achieve that goal, the board has adopted meeting procedures so that all parties will be provided an opportunity to speak. These procedures are outlined in the agendas available at the back of the room. This meeting is also broadcast on cable television. Speaking on behalf of the entire board and city staff, our objective is to provide a review process that is thorough, fair, and without unnecessary delay. The next order of the business is the approval of the minutes. I'm not sure we all had an opportunity to get the minutes and read them thoroughly, so we're going to defer consideration of the October 6th meeting's minutes till next month. And that moves us to the first petition on the agenda this evening. It's a continued petition, a request for approval of construction of the new girls' dormitory and the associated relocation of the orangerie and demolition of Durand Cottage at Lake Forest Academy, located at 1500 West Kennedy Drive. The owner is Lake Forest Academy, and the representative is Peter Whitmer, architect. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm going to jump right in here and really just hit all the points that the questions that came up in our last meeting, and I think comments were good, and we've done a bunch of work and research and have come up with some different solutions. The first one, I'm going to first focus on the new building, on the Ferry Hall building, and then we'll move to the Durand house, and then the last thing, just hit a few things on the cottage. The first was the window on the front elevation we had looked at in terms of, my battery's not so good, but basically the center window in the front, and the thought was that the proportions of that window were a little peculiar and a little large, and we thought so too. Oh, great. Right there? Oh, that was good. Thanks. Okay, there we go. This, in terms of the scale and its proportion and how it was subdivided, was a little peculiar, and we've come up with a different solution, one that is more similar to what was done in Atlas in some of the older buildings, and it's smaller in scale, and I think you can't really see a person here, but a person is about 6 feet high, is about that big. So we think that this is a better solution in the scale and proportion to the mass of that piece. The next is the site plan. This is the original site plan that we were proposing in our first proposal. And you can see, just notice the parking that was here, the building location is here, and then these were the trees that we were trying to protect. And we met with the forester out there, and we really concluded that this tree and these old maples along the old wall line are really not worth saving. They're in rough shape and have really lived their life, and it would be better to move the building to the east 10 feet to protect these. There's a couple of ginkgo trees and then these really 3 large elms here. The other is that there's 2 trees in this parking area which are not in very good shape, and so we can consolidate all this parking. Here's the revised plan where we've taken out the parking along here, which I think helps for our drainage, and actually it's not as intrusive into this existing structure. We've moved this building 10 feet to the north, or I mean to the east, which gave us a little more room around the existing trees we're trying to save. And we also cleaned up some of the sidewalks. That we had a sidewalk that went across the center here, which we've eliminated, and then we used to have one that goes through here where these trees are, and we really have these just the 2 ways into the Duran house. This is the Duran house building. This is the new dorm, and then we've just put all of our parking together, which I think is a better solution. The next thing on the Duran house, we met with Susan Benjamin and had a meeting with her, and actually thought it was very productive. And a couple of photographs that we found. This is a picture of the original garden. This is the orangerie on the back side of it here, and its existing location. And what our thoughts were was on that location, this is the greenhouses. This is the cottage that we're proposing to demolish, and then these are the old greenhouses, and this is the orangerie behind here. So when you were standing out in the formal gardens, which is to the left here, you'd look over top this, and you would just catch the top edge of this building. So actually those pineapples on top of the building were pretty important, because you'd see them from the formal garden and see them over that way. And I didn't really think about it that much, but as we looked at it more, this is just an original garden plan. So just to show you from a plan view, the orangerie is right here. The formal garden's here. That greenhouse complex is in front of it. So you would stand here and look over top of it and see that front elevation that way. And as we studied this, we looked at it and said, you know, basically, we were planning, this is the front face, this is where it sits today, and was where the formal gardens was. We were originally planning on taking the building and just scooting it this way and having the front face actually face west. Well, we thought it would make more sense to have to move the building, flip it 180 degrees, and have this face out the main green space, which is out here, so that when you walk down the axis of the different roads, you could see this building over top the one-story building, which would show those pine cones in that top edge of the building in the same way that it was over here. And we said, okay, well, does that really work? So we did a quick little massing sketch. This would be if you're standing across the field hockey field on the other piece. That line is the one-story building addition that's onto this, and that you see those pineapples on top and just the top edge of that building. So we think it makes sense to flip the building, have the front face the green in the public space here, and have the back, which is going to get hidden anyways with our back porch structure on the building. So that we were proposing actually to turn the building 180 degrees from what it was and put the face front toward the open space. The last thing that we looked at in terms of the elevations was this is what we proposed originally, to have straight windows, and it was asked if we would look at integrating into arches into the elevation, much like that was in the original building. The original building was a one-story space, so they didn't have this floor line to deal with. All these windows were arched that went along here. And we looked at 3 different schemes. One was if we just had arches, straight arches. And this is back when we had the back of the building, which is this. You can see these piers don't come up all the way, as they are here. So that was our first scheme. And then our second scheme was if we were not to create the brick arches, but just to infill the flat space. So you can see these squares, that's where the flat windows are, and we had these little arch windows along in those residential units in those bedrooms. So those were the two arch solutions that we came up with. The economics of this is the first scheme is more expensive because we have to actually build these brick arches. You know, we have to pull out the windows, build brick arches, and then stick the windows back in. So that was about around a $40,000 to $50,000 upswing for that. This is a little less expensive in one way because we don't have to build the brick arches. We just really just fill in with bricks here. But the windows are actually more expensive because you have two arch windows as opposed to the pair of one. So this is around $30,000 to $35,000 additional for this scheme. In all the schemes, we still think that the end elevation makes a lot of sense. We have subdivided it differently so that really matches what we're planning on doing or relates better to what we're doing in Ferry Hall, and we think it really makes more sense from a historic standpoint too. This is the scheme that we're proposing, I think, that makes the most sense. And why you save, you know, $50,000 or $30,000 isn't a lot of money. In the grand scheme of things, the whole project, it isn't, but it does become a lot of money when we have a finite amount, and so where does that money come from? So we have to, you know, either take it out of landscape budget or some other budget like that can be somewhat elective. So what we had $100,000 in for landscape now becomes, you know, 60 or 50,000. It really has an impact on what we do. This shows the building flipped around, which has the columns faced out to the street. This dashed line is the single-story Macintosh building in front of it. So you can see how all these windows you don't see from the center green at all, whether they're arched or straight. And we use this just to indicate that. The last piece was just a little better detail on our back porch detail. And basically what we're proposing is to use a whole steel structure so that these will be pipe columns and tube sections, which create the outer pieces. This will be metal deck underneath with a concrete topping, metal steel railings. All this will be painted a dark green or black and really somewhat disappear in terms of the elevation. So that was the last piece that we had. And then the last thing that we wanted to talk about was in the demolition permit. I think we're comfortable now with a 2-year period. There was some question in our last meeting about what the time frame would be from when we would tear down the building, the cottage, what we were proposing. And what we're comfortable now with a 2-year period after we finish the completion of the dormitory to demolish the cottage after that. I think that was our last issue. I think that pretty much covers the questions that I was aware of. If there's anything else, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Whitmer. If staff would like to comment on the key issues.
Thank you, Chairman Culbertson. Since your last meeting, we have met and spoken with Mr. Whitmer a number of times. We also facilitated a meeting between Mr. Whitmer and Susan Benjamin, the preservation consultant, who did the report you saw previously when this came before you. From the staff perspective, we feel that the issues you've raised have been carefully explored. Not all of them have been addressed perhaps in the way some of your comments would have implied that you would have preferred. Certainly cost is an issue. This dormitory is really possible only because of donations. So we do understand that there is a balancing going on. The preservation of the Orangerie Durand House really is significant to this campus. I think preserving the various little treasures that are on the campus really makes this a very unique place. Staff supports the change in proportion to the large window on the new dormitory. On the east elevation, it really seems to have addressed some of the awkwardness. Included in your packet is a recommendation in support of the project. 3 motions are before you. The first motion is a recommendation to approve Ferry Hall, the new girls' dormitory, subject to conditions, coordination with the city arborist for any tree removals, and that already is underway. Tree preservation mechanisms, including chain link fence if necessary, and then I neglected to put a third condition on, which you did talk about last time, was that we still will need to bring a landscape plan for this general area back to the Building Review Board, but there really is some sense in waiting till the existing trees are removed, the Duran House gets relocated, and the new girls' dormitory begins to come out of the ground. So we would propose a condition, something to the effect of after relocation of Duran House and the framing for the new girls' dormitory is in place, we would bring back a landscape plan before you, and certainly that would need to come before you before we issued any certificate of occupancy for the new girls' dormitory. The second motion before you, and I actually got a little confused. I went back and viewed the tape. You actually passed a motion approving the demolition of Duran Cottage last time, but asked that we bring back language on the timing. So probably the cleanest way to do it is to simply approve that motion again with the 4 conditions, one of which says that Duran Cottage must be demolished and the site restored as open space no later than 2 years from the date of issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the new girls' dormitory. That will allow time for the faculty units currently in use in Duran Cottage to be replaced, but it will also give the board assurance that that open space that's been discussed is put in place. The third motion is a motion to approve the relocation and restoration of Duran House, which is the historic orangery. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Questions and requests for clarification from the board to petitioner or staff?
I have a question for petitioner, and I'm sorry I didn't hear you say earlier, but I had asked about the railings and the decking before. What is the material of the decking on the
The decking
porch?
actually will be, underneath it'll be a metal pan, and then
Okay.
on top of it will be concrete.
Okay, and is all that under roof?
It is
Even
all
the-
under roof,
The
correct.
stairs themselves?
Yeah, the
And
stairs
what is
themselves.
that roof?
It'll be a flat roof too, which will have a metal deck underneath, and then it'll be a single-ply membrane roofing. It'll be a flat roof. You won't see that roof piece on there because it'll be flat
Okay,
for that.
great, thank you.
Peter, on that same note, what's the ceiling material?
It's gonna be painted metal deck.
Corrugated?
Corrugate, yeah, a 4-inch metal deck. It'll be painted out.
4-inch with what?
Typically it's 1.5 inch depth on that,
And that's true of the underside then
of the lower side too,
bottom part.
right.
And then the rail is?
It's a pipe rail with then pickets, so it'll have 1.5 inch pipe rail top and bottom.
Stairs are metal?
And the stair will be a metal pan stair with concrete in the
And
infill.
what color is this whole, and the columns too, before?
Yeah, everything in metal will be painted like
What
an
color?
ivy green, like a very dark green.
Like
So it'll
the
be almost
color
like a
of these
black,
chairs
a little
that
bit darker
shine or
than that.
something? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like a historic color that when you look far away, it looks black. And when you really get up close, it
Okay.
looks dark green.
And then I had some questions, as long as maybe got the floor. As I look at these schemes, I'm curious about something that happens on scheme 1 and 2 that's different than scheme 3, and maybe if you could just clarify that for me. What it looks like on these east elevations are this corbelled buttress of brick, and then on the west elevation, it looks like a pier? Is
Yeah,
it-
what we did on the-
Is it consistent on one elevation or another?
What we did is we were developing these arch schemes, and then we flipped the building. So the 2 sides of the building aren't the same of the existing building. One was designed to face the garden,
Okay.
which has the piers all the way up and has the pineapples on top of it. The other was the back of the building basically, and it corbelled back. And we had always thought that the back, you know, just from the ease of moving it, like we just take it and move it like this, you know, because it's easier to move it like this than it is to take it, pick it up, get it off its foundation, turn it 180 degrees, and then move it like that. So we drew the first arches with it just moving this way. What we're really proposing is to turn it 180 degrees and then set it down so that the arches and the pineapples face out toward the courtyard, which we think.
So if we could pull up scheme 3 for me, please.
Sure.
So you're suggesting that scheme 3 has the buttresses and the piers on the correct side of the elevation?
Correct.
And that 1
We-
and 2 do not?
Correct.
Okay, so we've got to sort of transpose our thoughts when we're looking at this.
Well, we
that
think
right?
this is a money well spent. We
Well,
think that
I'm-
flipping the building,
Well, regardless of flipping the building, if you look at this, you see the piers on the east elevation, right?
Right.
And the buttresses on the west. Now go
Correct.
back to your other schemes.
yeah, and this is the opposite.
That's the opposite.
Correct.
So is one incorrect?
Well, one is taking the building one way and taking it with it, moving it, taking it and sliding it this way, where we don't flip the building 180 degrees. And the other would be flipping the building 180 degrees and putting it in place. You can
So as we
interchange
look
these
at,
things.
we can interchange
You can
these. So as we look at
interchange
this,
those
we can say,
Is it-
we like the
is it
piers
say,
on.
we tried to say, okay, what is the most important thing? Where do we get the best bang for our buck?
Okay,
We think buying pineapples and flipping the building 180 degrees makes more sense in the total grand scheme of things than buying arched windows that really aren't like what they were historically.
okay, and I thank you for the cost.
Does that make sense?
It
I know
does.
it's a little bit confusing.
And thank you for the cost estimates, but I'm not sure that's going to factor too much into the way I'm going to view it. I'm here to look at, I guess, the aesthetics of it and make my recommendation based on it. And then my other last question was the sidewalk that you said you took out. I'm just curious as to whether, and I'm going to pose it in the form of a question, whether you think that people are gonna walk across the grass to get from sidewalk at point A and to point B, or if they're gonna go the long way around.
You know, and we, that's how we arrived at where we were. We were trying, I was really thinking that, one is that were people really gonna walk from the campus, come through here, down through here, and across here to get this way? And if you really see the way that people get to West Campus or West Village right now, what they do is they come down here and walk through a path that's right here. So it's more direct to go this way than it is to go through this and that way. The other thing is if we can sort of not encourage people to go this way, we don't have them walking through a pretty tight, you know, basically the front, you know, these residential units. It's better if they come this way. So that's why we eliminated that one. The other one is that will people park here and walk through this way to get through that? I would imagine that they would, but I still think by having it's better to have a foot traffic over those root systems than it would be to pour concrete over it. So I think it makes more sense to do that.
That's it. Thanks.
I have a question going back to the girls' dorm for the entry, at the entry tower. Is the entry actually recessed under the archway?
Yes.
Okay, because I guess what I'm wondering about is just the relationship of the top of the door head to the spring of the arch.
I know, and it's a little bit funny in the elevation because they don't line up and all that. And we actually have an issue because we originally thought that we might not want to have a floor in this space above and just kind of have an empty tower. But then we thought those are, in this space, this is a two-story space in the lower level. Up above, they're public spaces. They're like living rooms for the girls. And basically, we thought this little tower room was a terrific little space, so we wanted to create that. Well, the scale of the arch, when you come with that floor right there in the top, it gets really, really tight.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't have the arch on the inside, and we didn't have the clearance really to make that work on the inside.
So I guess, I don't know if you would consider doing something else with the door or, you know,
I mean, we
arching
could look
the
at other
door.
solutions, but that's what we,
Something a little funny there.
between the one, because they aren't an exact mirror to the one to the other.
Right, and the door is so close to the arch, it doesn't look like.
It's about 12 feet though.
Okay.
That porch is, that outside space, that's why we thought it was okay, is because they don't really line up. So in plan, like this arch, that tower's about 12 foot square, and that door's on the back side of that, so you walk through that tower.
So, and then there's 12 foot.
And there's
from
12 feet
the
to
arch
the-
opening to the door.
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's pretty good space in there. And we thought that, you know, that covered space was a great space for people, you know, it's a nice way to get in the building. You know, take your umbrella out, you got 20 kids coming in at once, they're all standing in the rain, you're waiting for somebody to pick you up, all those sorts of things was important. Because the other solution is to move the door out to the outside face of that. And we thought that wasn't very good.
Yeah, well, I
idea.
think it clears that up, because if it's not in the same plane, then I
It kinda
definitely
helps,
think
yeah.
it works better.
Makes sense.
And, I just have a question, I think it's just the prints, there's different color variations between, the presentation today and the one a couple weeks ago, but you're trying to match the brick that's on the sports building.
Correct.
Okay.
It's going to max, yeah, the color variation, when you print the thing from what you get and what we get in your color printer, it's not, but the brick is the same. The only difference will be is we're going to use a standard brick size. We're not going to use a jumbo size like they did on the gym.
And then the final question is for the cottage, you prefer scheme 3, that's the scheme that you're really presenting?
That's what
though,
we
with
think makes the most
With the
sense. And-
straight top windows, the simple double hungs, okay.
Yeah, and we think that you know, it's tough to view those arches because we have moved that building 10 feet closer to the other building. They're tight in there. You can't see it from the other side. So we think that makes the most sense.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Peter, the parking spaces that you removed over by the cottage, it just seems to me there's never enough parking anywhere that we go these days. And I was wondering what you're thinking.
Actually, we thought, we looked at that in terms of the number of spaces that's provided and the number of faculty units that are there. The one thing that, let me just pull that up, just these guys here.
Yeah.
We went back and counted the number of spaces that we need for faculty here. One of the nice things about this parking area, it is no student parking. It is no parent parking. The only people that can drive back here are faculty.
Okay.
So that helps a lot. One
Okay.
is just for the safety of moving people. When parents come to pick up their children from the dormitory, they have to come through this, and that is really what this is. They're not allowed to go back through here.
Okay.
Students aren't allowed to park anywhere on this side. They have to stay on the other side of campus. That helps a lot.
Okay.
So that is the first thing. The other is that in the number of parking that we need to provide for these faculty, we feel like this is adequate. If we were to develop this space in the future, we would have to add this parking for additional housing that might go here. So I think by eliminating this parking here, one is it helps a drainage situation that we're creating. The other is you know, I think it's much less intrusive into this existing structure, and how this works too is better. So you know, this house still has its 2 parking spaces here, and it'll still work as it is today. So all those will work the same. And then all these parking spaces will have for these faculty. There's 4 here, and then there's 6 there.
Okay.
So I think we're fine with those.
So the parking for the gym is adequate, and you wouldn't, at
They-
this point, you don't think you need it for
We
overflow?
would not allow public to come back
Oh, you
here and
wouldn't?
park.
Okay.
Basically, what they do, I mean, the overflow parking is in that lot that is coming down the other side.
Okay.
And then when they have an event, you know, like the holiday event that they have, you know, or a big event, they actually park in this field.
Oh, okay.
You know, so you can park in that field. And,
Okay.
You know, and so that's kind of how they handle that
Okay,
situation.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I had 2 more quick questions.
Go ahead, John.
Peter, as I look at the elevation for Ferry Hall, On the bottom of the building, it looks like there's something more than just the concrete foundation projecting out of the ground. Is that?
Yep, we have a little
considering-
stone base that goes
So
around.
that's a
the bottom.
limestone base?
It's a cast stone. It's the same that we use in the gym, which is basically, it looks like
So
limestone.
that, and that holds up to weather and drain? I mean, too many times I see limestone down at the base and it
Yeah.
looks like it cocks
That-
pretty bad
I
and
mean, the
falls.
cost difference between architectural stone and limestone is about the same. Typically, what we like to use is an architectural cast stone.
And that's
Because
more
it holds up
durable.
better, because salt and all that, just, it eats it up. You see it around.
Yeah, oh, it
You know,
eats
you
it
think
up.
limestone's like, oh, it's
No,
limestone. It doesn't
water
really work out
swallows
well.
it pretty easily.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming there's, I saw in the package here, aluminum for gutters and downspouts.
Correct.
I'm assuming white gutters.
Yes.
Am I also safe to assume white downspouts?
Correct.
And they're not shown, but they're occurring,
I don't know. I think
5 or
we do
6
have them
times
in there,
on
but
each.
I don't know that we're, I mean, you can see it just a little bit. Like, there's a little line there and there's a little line there.
do it again, are they next to these piers?
Yeah, that's where we like to tuck them in there
Okay.
behind us. I mean, they're pretty prevalent, though. You'll see them.
You'll see them if they're white.
You'll see them when they're
Are
white.
you,
It's white against black, kind of, or white against red, you know, so you'll
would you
see
be
'em.
in favor, or have you considered doing a color to match the brick for the downspouts, or is that,
I don't know. I mean, we have the windows, and the windows are gonna be white, too. I mean, that's
Okay.
what we have in the gym. It seems to make more sense to do it like the trim color.
okay, no other questions?
Charlie?
One question, Peter. If you could bring up the site plan, I believe when you were here last time, there was a wall remnant that kind of ran from the original estate that was just to the east, I guess, of that. Now,
Yeah.
with moving this building about 10 feet, are you encroaching on the wall? You kind of had some vague idea what you want to do with the wall. What's kind of the
I
thinking
know.
on that?
We met with Susan Benjamin and, you know, trying to go through this and think through what is the relics of this thing and how it's significant. And, you know, her idea wasn't that, you know, she thought that the building, turning the building and that sort of thing was way more important than the foundation of this, the wall and trying to preserve that wall. So now we're taking it all out. And I actually think, you know, by saving that foundation to go along here, it just becomes kind of like a safety hazard. I mean, it's, you kids trip over unless we do something with it, and it's really sort of in the wrong place. We are, you know, in the future, we might consider a path that goes through this way to future things that go this way between those two, and we still have enough space to do that. But yeah, the other walls that are there, like this corner wall that's all there, I don't know if you walked back there and you probably saw there's really some kind of neat little pieces that were there. All those remain, and we really aren't encroaching in those, but that foundation wall is now going to come out.
I actually have one question of Monica. I think in our last meeting, you would question the size of the brick being used, construction of the dormitory
Right.
that matches the athletic center.
Yeah, I was questioning if it was matching the athletic center, and then I was pleased that he said it was going to be a smaller scale brick, which I think is appropriate because the dorm is a residential facility, whereas the gym, you know, has the bigger, larger
And that's
jumbo
true, Peter?
bricks.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I mean, I see that big jumbo brick, and it looks peculiar to.
Okay. So
Okay. I think we've covered it with questions. Now is the opportunity for the public to comment on this project. Is there anyone who wishes to step forward and address the board? Seeing no one, it is now time for any final questions from the board before we take it to discussion. I think we've been pretty thorough in our questions. So now is the time to deliberate.
Well, I like that I'm seeing 3 schemes here, and I appreciate the effort on estimating prices and presenting that to us for consideration. Of the 3, I'm not liking the double arched window into the, so scheme 2, I'm not a big fan of. So, which leads me to the discussion of the preferred square flat top windows versus the arched windows that, to me, suggest that this is an orangery, and I'm, as I look at this and the logic behind it, and I understand it's a historic building and picking it up and moving it, and I guess the donors that are, you know, anxious to see this building kept and restored and all that. I look at the logic of taking what is a historic orangery and with the arched windows as they presented, it was in the original design, and squaring them off. It seems like it's a contradiction of logic. You know, I'm battling with that a little bit. The double window scheme I'm not a big fan of. So I'd like to hear other members talk about the issue of, you know, are we preserving an orangery, or are we taking a brick building and moving it and changing it to something that has, you know, cost implications, and just says to me it's a, you know, residential building of some sort.
Now, why don't we take that issue up? It's the fenestration of the of Durand House. Do we have a preference amongst ourselves for the straight windows or the arched windows? And if we like the arched, which of the two proposals?
Personally, I'm looking. I can't separate the whole project from just the arch windows, just from the impact of what they've decided to turn this thing on axis, put the pineapples back on the roof. I think they made some great changes here in the scheme of things. You know, I look at where it's sited against the other low-slung building to its east, and your viewpoint there. I don't think you're going to see much of that arch window because of the building when you're looking at it from any kind of distance. As you get a little closer, you might be able to see it a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, and considering as much work as we've done here, I don't have a problem with scheme 3 if that's really their preferred way to do it. That's just my feeling. I don't feel that strongly in scheme 1.
Can you guys refresh me? What's consistent with the original?
Arched.
The arch.
The arch, but is it double arch or single arch?
It's more single arch, like
right.
the scheme 1.
Right.
Looking at the 3 schemes, I actually prefer scheme 3. I like that the building has been flipped, that the acorns are facing the public space. It's the more formal side of the building. And I think the simple rhythm of the windows and the uniformity of it just makes for a very handsome and consistent building. When I look at the arched schemes, the one with the single, you know, the larger arch, the mutton pattern of those arches seem odd to me, especially once they reach the top of the arch. You know, the sizes of them become awkward, and then the double arch to me starts to look almost like a religious building. It doesn't really seem to fit with the building, you know. And so I personally prefer scheme 3.
What do you think, Peggy?
Well, I like the arch idea because it is from the original, but the ends have the arches, and so I wouldn't necessarily vote against scheme 3.
Maddie, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I like the historic aspect of the arched windows, but I agree with Monica that I'm not crazy about the proportion of the top windows in the arches in scheme 1. And I think scheme 3, I think it would work. And I like the addition of the pineapples and the pillars, and I think it's very attractive.
I'll ask my architect colleagues on the board, would it be inappropriate to use the arches in scheme 2 that are at the rear on the west elevation? and combine that with the straight windows on the east elevation from scheme 3.
You're talking about the mullion pattern, the mutton pattern?
The west elevation of scheme 2 has 4 double-arched windows on the second floor. All right? And combining that with the east elevation in scheme 3, is that unsuitable?
Yeah, I'm not liking that.
I mean, they're 2 opposite sides of the building. It does manage to get some of the arched windows into the equation.
I kind of agree with whoever said it looks a little religious with the double arch windows.
No,
and
I wouldn't
the-
do the...
Is that what you're suggesting?
No, no.
Oh, you're talking
I'm
about?
looking at the west elevation on that page, the top.
Oh, of,
The
Yeah,
top.
So
with
you're
the double,
suggesting have arches on only one side?
Exactly.
Oh.
with the double arched windows? Like on the west elevation?
West elevation, scheme 2.
I'm looking at
Those are the
that.
double ones then.
those are the,
Those are the double,
Double arches, but,
Okay.
well, but alternatively. Scheme, the west elevation on scheme 1.
Yeah, but that only has on the outer.
Right.
yeah.
I'm just trying to creatively think of a way to get some arches onto one of the facades, one of the elevations.
I think the
But I
big
might be
arch.
working too hard.
Right.
These
I
big
just think the
ends.
big ends with the
Yeah.
north and south having the big arch is really
Are
a
adequate?
statement in itself.
Right.
And so for the sides to be a little more simple,
Now, the sides were like the north and south at one point, were they not? Because we turned this into a 2-story building versus a 1-story.
Right.
And so, you know, getting back to historical significance, that was all one window to begin with, so we're not, even if you do an arch window, you're not going back to what historically was there.
Right.
That's true.
because it's been adapted and changed over the
Correct.
years. So I think it, it's just,
All right, so it seems our consensus is around scheme 3 as presented, right?
okay.
Okay. I'm just going to tick down the list of things that Peter addressed that we had asked him to address in our prior meeting. Are we in agreement that rotating Durand House 180 degrees is desirable?
Yes.
Yes.
Any dissent to that position? So we approve that as well. The metal railings, flat roof on the west elevation,
Yeah.
was that satisfactorily addressed?
Yeah.
I'm
That's fine.
assuming that that roof is slightly sloped and there's
It looks like
drainage that's gonna work and everything.
sloped into the building, right?
And the scale and proportion of the front elevation of the girls' dorm, our issues there, were they satisfactorily addressed?
Yeah, I think that window looks much better.
Yeah. it does.
And then the two-year requirement for the demolition of Durand Cottage from the date of issuance of the occupancy permit. We're all in agreement with that.
That's reasonable.
And then finally, a hardscape landscape plan that must be submitted to the Building Review Board after relocation of Durand House and the frame-out of the dormitory is complete. At that
Yes.
juncture, we would require a landscape plan, including hardscape details. Is there anything else that we need to discuss with respect to this position?
I actually had one question for the petitioner. Is it okay to ask at this point?
What's the question?
Well, I'm wondering, the condition of changing the arch, the existing arch windows to the flat, is there a brick infill that has to take place? Is there a surgical removal of brick to fix and tuck point and blend?
No, actually, they were changed in 1948 when it was changed. They were changed to be
They were
flat.
changed to be
So
flat
we would
back then.
actually be
Okay.
redoing them back to make arches.
Got it. Got it. Thanks.
Okay, well then I think we're ready to vote on these motions in order. They've conveniently been presented for us in the staff report. So I would ask one of the board members to proceed through the motions as they are articulated in the staff report, beginning with the new construction of Ferry Hall.
Okay. We don't need to read them all, I just say staff
No,
recommendations.
right.
I move to approve new construction of Ferry Hall based on motion number 1 with all recommendations as submitted in staff report to include a landscape plan that would come back to the BRB after relocation of Durant House and framing for the new girls' dorm is completed.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? Do we, I think we might include the fenestration as presented in scheme 3, right? As
We're
being-
on Ferry Hall.
That's Ferry Hall.
I'm sorry,
Ferry Hall.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Isn't that where we're at?
Oh, that's on the Durant House.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right.
Motion and a second has been
Okay,
done.
no further discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion 1 is carried. How about motion 2, Peggy?
I further recommend a demolition of Duran Cottage as presented in motion number 2, to include all the recommendations for staff as presented in the report, and to also include individually on each recommendation the landscape plan that will come back to the BRB after relocation of Durant House and framing for the new girls' dorm is complete.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this motion? Amendments? Hearing none, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion 2 is approved. And now motion 3, Durand House.
I move to approve the relocation and restoration of Durand House, the Orangerie, which is motion number 3 as presented in staff report with all recommendations, and to include a landscape plan, which is to come back to the BRB after the relocation of Durand House and framing for the new girls' dorm is complete.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Would anybody like to offer discussion or amendments to that one? Here, would it be appropriate to include scheme 3 fenestration?
Yes.
Yes,
As well
yes,
as the metal
yes.
railings and flat roof that the petitioner presented to us?
Agreed.
Yes.
With those amendments, any further discussion? And we'll take it to a vote. All in favor of motion 3, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion 3 is approved as well. Congratulations, Peter, and to all of you at Lake Forest Academy. Once again, I'd like to compliment you on the thoroughness of your work and your willingness to cooperate with the board. You've come before us a number of times over the last several years, and I, for one, have been very impressed with your ability to blend new construction with the architectural heritage of the campus. It's been very nicely balanced, and your efforts are to be applauded. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck with the project. Okay, does anybody want to take a break, or we forge ahead, right? The next item on the agenda is a new petition. It's a request for approval for the demolition of the existing residence and the design of a replacement structure located at 345 West Onwensia Road. The owners are Ken and Beth Pollard, and the representative is John Krasnodebski, architect. I will refer to you as Mr. K for the duration of the evening.
Johnny K.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is John Krasnodebski. I'm the architect for the Pollard residence at 345 West Onwencia Road. And we're here tonight to request a demolition of the existing home that's there and also for approval of the replacement structure.
Mr. Kay, if I may interrupt you just for a second, I would like to ask the board members if any of them feel as though there's a conflict of interest with respect to this petition or any ex parte contact.
I am a colleague and friend of John's, but that won't change my opinion on the project.
Thank you, John. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Proceed.
We'll start with the pictures of the neighborhood. I just have to get the password logged in here. So the existing home is a ranch home built in the 1950s. It's about 2,400 square feet. We had a structural engineer look at it, and there are some structural deficiencies. We did look at working with the existing structure, and we found that we cannot overcome many of these structural deficiencies and site deficiencies that are in existence. This is the photograph of the existing home at 345 West Onwencia. And the structural deficiencies start with the foundation. It is an 8-inch thick foundation wall. It's a frame construction, although there is a little bit of a brick wainscoting on the front elevation to the left of the home and at the entrance. But it is predominantly a frame structure. So we looked at, taking the roof off and going up with a second story, but with an 8-inch foundation, we couldn't do that with a brick structure. There are deficiencies, cracks, and so forth. Nothing that could not be overcome there, but there are many steel beams that are very undersized in that basement. Some other issues with the basement is that it is a partial basement. Less than half is a full basement, while the remaining is slab and crawl space. So we'd have to dig that out, and that's when you get to that extent of rework, it leaves very little appreciable value of the existing home. So we did examine that and found that that was not a viable option. We also looked at, here's a picture of the rear of the house, and it's consistent with its frame construction. There's a screen porch. There's a tree of note on the right-hand side. That's an elm tree that is we're going to work hard to preserve. I'll go on with some of the streetscape photographs. The top left is on Onwencia, looking east, and it's pretty consistent streetscape, larger pieces of property, tree-lined. There's a nice mix of architectural styles on the street, and so there's a lot of influences and variety. This is the streetscape looking west. This is the house directly to the east, and this is house directly to the west. Some other shots of the neighborhood across the street. There's a picket fence. There's a mix of styles, colonial. There's the colonial there. There's actually a prairie-style home just around the bend in Onwencia. Some other homes in the immediate neighborhood. A mix of 2-story and 1.5-story. There's ranch homes on either side of 345. So quite a blend. So this diagram shows our efforts to look at trying to reuse the home. So we looked at additions. Since the 2nd-story option didn't work, we looked at other options. And they don't work. There are some restrictions as far as the setbacks from a zoning standpoint. If you do an addition on the east or west side, those would be non-conforming to the setbacks that are required. You have to have 20 feet on this side. Actually, the setback on the east side is 50 feet because there is a public easement. This is actually a city-owned property, and so that mandated a wider setback on the east side. The front setback is 50 feet. So the sides didn't work as options for additions. There is an issue with the grading on the back of the property. It's low and the foundation is low, so adding structure on the back would exacerbate the water infiltration that's occurring in the back of the house. And you look at a front addition, we didn't like that because basically it would change the aesthetics of the house, and it creates too deep of a house, and you get too much internal space without natural light and ventilation. So we didn't like the idea of a substantial addition on the front. So, you know, after looking at those options, we certainly felt that, and the condition of the home, the structural inadequacies of the roof, is undersized framing, the foundation, and the amount of crawl space, it just didn't make sense to try to work with that house. So we came up with a new design, and it's essentially shifted to the street by 27 feet from the existing home. Part of the footprint is in the existing home's footprint. We still have 70 feet of distance from the setback line, from the property line to the front of the house. 50 is required, so we're still an extra 20 behind that line. There's a significant parkway dimension too of 20 feet. So there's a nice distance between the street and the front of the new home. The garage is side-loaded, which is a nice feature, so the doors aren't visible to the street. I'm going to go over the landscape plan. I'm going to go to the architectural rendering of the front of the home. So the architectural influence is French Norman farmhouse architecture, and so some of the elements, or a lot of elements that you see in that architecture is inherent in this home. Some of the features are a rustic brick on the exterior, the use of heavy timbering around doors and windows, a hip roof, and also arched dormers that penetrate the eave line. So it offers asymmetrical balance and a 1.5-story look, so it kind of nestles in better, doesn't show as much elevation to the street. So I think it's going to be a very quiet home. The brick that we're considering is a Chicago Common brick, and then the trim color is going to be a sage green. They are casement windows that are simulated divided light windows. It's a cedar shingle roof. There are some limestone treatment around the front door. This is hopefully a little bit clearer. This is a line drawing of the front of the home. The gutters are aluminum and downspouts are aluminum. There are some decorative leader boxes. The color will still be the sage green. Soffit and fascia is sage green, as well as the window color. And then the brick is a tan buff color. Chicago Common is kind of a neutral tan. The detailing is consistent on all sides of the home, the timbering above the windows, the arched topped dormers, same brick on all sides. This is the garage elevation. Apologize, it's a little light. Here's the opposite elevation. So the elevations that show to the neighbors are fairly narrow. This shows the overlay of existing to new. It is a ranch home with a very shallow pitched roof. The proposed home is 31 feet at its highest point, and that's just this section here. Most of the roof is at 29. What's allowed on this almost acre site is 35 feet in height, so we're well below the maximum. Also, the bulk is below the maximum allowable. 5,100 square feet is allowed approximately. This is 4,800 square feet, so it's 7% below the maximum allowable. This is the streetscape. You can see there's a large amount of space in between the property and the neighbor to the east. There's that easement, and that's creating that distance plus the setback that's required for the pollards. So there's a good amount of distance. You can see, some homes of similar size and height in the area. The floor plan, I'll skip through. The roof plan section. The nature of a 1.5-story home is that we have these shorter wall heights at the exterior. They're 4-foot knee walls for the most part. But again, that's an effort just to keep the height lower, and I think that nestles into the landscape much nicer. So addressing the demolition criteria, there are 5 criteria, and I believe that we meet all of the required elements of the criteria. Number 1 is the existing structure itself, in relation to its surroundings, does not have special historical, architectural, aesthetic, or cultural significance to the community. So this criteria is met. There are no records to show that that there's any historically significant significance to this home. Criteria number 2 is realistic alternatives, including adaptive reuses, do not exist because of the nature or cost of work necessary to preserve the structure or to realize any appreciable part of its value. And I believe this criterion is met as well. You know, we explored those modifications through additions, a second-story addition, and once you go through all that, you really don't realize any positive, there's no positive elements to keep that home. It's just, it's too altered too much, and it becomes significantly altered, so it doesn't make sense to reuse the house. Number 3, the structure in its present or restored condition is unsuitable for residential or a residentially compatible use. And other casualty damage or structural deterioration has rendered the structure an immediate health or safety hazard. I don't believe it's an immediate health or safety hazard. I mean, there are some code issues and some structural issues, but it is livable. It needs work, but you could live in it. It's just not, I think, a viable option to reuse it. Number 4, the demolition and/or the replacement structure will not adversely impact the value of the property within the neighborhood. So I think this certainly, this criteria is met. I think this new home will substantially, I think, positively impact the neighborhood. And lastly, criterion 5, the demolition or replacement structure will be compatible and not adversely impact the neighborhood character. So certainly I think this criteria is also met. I think this would be a nice addition to the streetscape. I think it fits in with the architecture. It's very traditional and fits in very well, particularly with its size and distance from the street. So in conclusion, I hope I've addressed many of the issues, and certainly if you have any questions, please ask them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kay. May we have comments from staff?
Thank you, Chairman Culbertson. Not very much to add. That was a very comprehensive presentation. The materials submitted really very comprehensively address the demolition criteria. The structural report provided very thorough information from the staff's perspective. We believe that the demolition criteria are clearly satisfied. The replacement structure significantly is under building scale, I believe by about 7%, which is significant. In many cases with replacement structures, the board sees homes that try to push up right to the maximum allowable. This home comes under the building scale and significantly under the height. Although the house does move forward slightly, it really is still set back a significant difference. The setback requirement in this area it is 50 feet. The house, I believe, is set back 70 feet, allowing for the large front yard, which is very characteristic of the Onwentsia streetscape. The replacement structure is well detailed in the plans, consistently detailed with the selected architectural style, and the materials are appropriate. The staff recommendation is to approve the demolition as well as the replacement structure. The conditions recommended are really the standard conditions that you see with many demolitions and replacement structures. Nothing really unique on this site that hasn't already been addressed or that needs careful attention. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Any questions or requests for clarification from the board to petitioner or staff?
I have a question for the petitioner. John, why did you bring the house that much further forward to the street? I'm concerned that the streetscape will make the house look that much more massive, especially now that you're between, you're between two ranches, and bringing it forward is going to make it look even more massive.
Well, you know, a couple of reasons. One is that there's an elm tree in the back, and we wanted to pull away from that because we feel that's the significant tree on the property. So we really like that tree, want to make sure that we stay far away from it to protect it. That was one of the reasons. Secondly, we are looking for some more buffer. Highway 41 is very close in the rear, a little bit to the south and west, and so we felt it might offer a little bit more opportunity for landscaping, some more buffering, pull away from the noise. And we felt there was enough distance from the street to the front of the home, that it wouldn't be a major change in its appearance from the street.
Okay, I'm just
we-
concerned because that whole line of homes on that side are all pretty much at the same distance back off the street.
Right, I did look at that. I believe the front of the Pollard's home is going to be even with the ranch home to the west. So by
Well,
pulling it
just-
forward, it won't be any further.
Just a corner of it, not
Yeah.
really the whole front of the house. It would definitely be that whole 20 feet more forward.
Right. The whole home is going to be even with the home to the west, the ranch home to the west. It won't be any further than the home to the west. East, I couldn't tell you how it relates to the home to the east.
Okay, but it would only be forward, it would only be even with maybe one corner because that house juts out a bit. So really the front face of that home
Oh, you're saying-
to the west is really further back. So
You know,
it's not really.
I'm not sure about the whole
Yeah.
house. You're right, the corner of it
Okay.
appears to match the front of the
So
Pollard's
your
house.
intent is to, because of the tree and then the buffer from the highway?
Correct. And they have 6 children, and so we want to keep the backyard as big as possible. So,
Thank you.
On that same point, Kathy, what is the front yard setback requirement? Is it 50 feet?
Required setback is 50 feet.
And you're at 70?
70.
With the new proposal?
Correct,
Oh.
correct, yeah. And there's a decent parkway, too. I think it's 20 feet on the parkway. So that's in addition to the 70.
I have a few questions. First of all, I suppose if we stay with the site plan, I see that now you have a circular driveway. And the curb cut to the east, is that the existing
That's
curb
right,
cut?
it is, the existing curb cut.
And then the curb cut to the west, that's going to be a new curb cut. And what is the relationship of that curb cut to the resident to the west? Are the driveways close together? I didn't look when I was out there.
I believe that curb cut to
Okay.
that house is further to the west. So it is in a good relationship to our new curb cut.
Okay.
There's a site plan, I'm going to double check that. I'm sure.
We've got a photo of it in our
Oh,
residence west of the subject house on the bottom right.
oh, okay.
I think it's pretty, it's not really.
And so they're not right next to each
They're
other?
not.
Right, it looks to be, it's oriented more to the west on
Okay.
that property, so the distance is pretty good.
Okay, and then I have a couple other questions. On the front elevation, there's just really some clarifications between your front elevation and the rendering that you provided.
Mm-hmm.
The entry on the rendering is displayed, it's a little different on each one, so are you proposing the entry on the line drawing or the rendering?
The line drawing
Okay.
is the one we're proposing. The rendering is a little bit, artistic freedom, and so the line drawing is more representative of the real.
And then going, again, comparing the two, the rendering displays the dormer over I believe it's the garage, at a lower elevation than the line drawing. See how it's,
Yes,
it
yes,
sits
definitely,
lower.
yeah, I noticed that.
And what is the intent? Is it the line drawing?
It's the line drawing, again, takes precedence. That is a bedroom, and so when we did the egress calculations, we needed 2 windows instead of 1 for
It
light and
looks
vent.
nice on the rendering.
It does, I know, but the code got in the way there.
Okay. And then, to me, the style of the home does seem like it seems to be more of a formal French eclectic style. I guess I don't really see too much of the country French in it, so I'm wondering, do you feel that the cupola is consistent with the style?
Yeah, I like it because it's a kind of a farm element. I know what you're saying, but I think there's, asymmetrical roof lines, but it's balanced. And I like the idea of the entry roof line being a little bit taller, and I think that helps balance the rest of the roof line with it. So I do like the cupola. I think it's a nice element that I think would work with the house.
Okay. And then, over your arched windows in the dormers, do you have a brick jack arch above
That's right.
that?
It's
Okay.
brick.
And then when I look at the timber arches over the windows on the first floor, you also have, you know, it's a flared header, but you kind of have it inverted, you know, so the jack arch on top is flaring out this
Right,
way, and then you've got the
right.
timbers going the opposite
Right.
way, and I wonder why you've chosen to kind of
You know,
flip
that,
those.
you know, I've seen it done, and so I think we referenced some, you know, farmhouse books that we were looking
Okay.
through, and we kind of liked that look. You know, it's not something that we're absolutely have to have that way. They certainly can go the other direction, I think. It's just a style that we've done and seen and kind of like it.
Okay. And I think that was the questions that's all I have. Thanks.
John, question on the main front entry. Above that, you've got a wrought iron railing.
Correct.
And is that just a window behind that, or is that a
It's
door?
a
kinda
Juliet
tough to tell.
balcony. They're French doors that open inwards, so you can belly up to that railing. So they are doors.
Okay, thank you.
What is the railing?
It's black metal.
And
It's
is,
above the front door.
I don't see any, or, you know, I don't see any detail on the railing.
Yeah, it's not very clear here, but I'm going to point it out. It's right there. So it's basically a,
Is it just an X?
Is it just a big
it's
X?
an X, correct.
How does that meet code for
We're going
railing?
to have every 4 inches do a bar, you know,
So
to
it'll
meet
have
the code. It's
bunch.
not going to go vertical, but what we're going to do is in the Roman grill design, we have an intermediate element to meet
One
code.
box,
Correct.
then another,
Correct.
and then another.
Correct. Yeah.
Could you clarify the color of the brick for me a little bit, please?
Chicago Common brick actually comes in a couple different shades, but we're going to be try to find a tan range, you know, so it's a light brown, not pink. There are some yellows that we like too, so it's going to be buff. Yellow, I mean bright yellow. I don't know if you're familiar with the Chicago Common. It's very subtle shades of buff color. So it's a lighter brick versus a darker brick. I think generally characterizes it. It has a little more rustic texture to it, and I think that's a nice thing to have. It has a nice patina to it. I think it's going to add some age to it, I think, which could be really attractive.
Thank you.
I have a question. I do like that knee wall that comes out next to the garage, but have you figured that radius of turning a car into that first stall off your driveway there? It's very tight.
Yeah, that is tight. You know, certainly that's going to come into play. We're going to examine that. That's something that we might, once we get the driveway in, really take a closer look at it, see how a car can function through
Right.
there.
Because,
You know, before we
there's not
build
even
it.
space. I mean, it's right at that
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah. So I think we are going to examine that a little bit closer. It's one of the
Yeah.
question marks we actually have
Okay.
ourselves.
If you were to alter that element, would you shorten it or eliminate
Well, I guess
it?
there are two things to do, right? You could shorten it, or you could pull it a little bit away from the driveway. Be another way to go.
Or eliminate it?
True, true. Yeah. Yeah, that's enough.
Not sure how I feel about pulling it away. Go on, Peggy, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Lloyd, I had,
Go ahead.
are you
John.
done?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
Trying to stay in the form of a question for you here, John. The flat windows with the arch soldier on the second floor dormers, have you considered putting arched windows into that space? Is that a budget situation
It is.
that's
It is. It's a
driving
budget
that horse?
situation. Yeah, exactly. We did the arches on the first floor, but we thought that the arch form would
And that's-
communicate an arch.
And
you know,
that's the
even though it's
same,
not glass.
I got you. I know. That's the same reasoning behind the arch above the garage doors as well.
Correct, correct.
Now, you can get flat doors with a brick arch, with the flat part being projected beyond the form of the arch, so would you, or have you given any thoughts to that, I guess, is my question to you?
Are you saying, so it's a brick arch, and then there's a wood arch below the brick arch, and then a flat door, I believe. is
Well, the
what it-
flat door would go beyond the top of the brick arch, so that the arch,
Oh, right, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. You know, that's,
just a...
that's something we could look at, I think, yeah, I'd be open to that, sure. Yeah.
And I guess my big question is, and maybe it plays off of Monica's formal French versus your presentation of country French. And I think what we might be seeing here is something that isn't as playful or, I don't know, it just seems like you've got brick and you've got soldier courses, and it just seems like there's a level of detail and thought that is trailing this presentation a bit to really bring on the character. I'm wondering if you feel that there is still some fine tuning that
I would
you'd
like
like to
to-
explore
I'd like to
beyond what
introduce
you're
some-
presenting here.
Right, I would think like a belt course of a Rolock, maybe at a wainscot level
Okay.
that projects out, something we were considering. Even a projected brick at the eave line, just before the fascia board, is another subtle detail.
Okay, I'd
Just to
like,
give a little bit of subtle relief to the wall and give it that other level of detail. So those are things that we're considering.
okay, and I'd like to bring that up maybe during discussion again once more, and maybe talk about the chimney details and what have you. All right, here's my big question, John, and it's in the floor plan, and it's someplace where I don't have any purview at all. But did you realize, or can you reconsider opening the front door and seeing the toilet right away? It's a question.
Yeah, right, that's a big issue, right. We did cram that one in, you
Okay.
know, so.
No
obviously
further
the-
questions.
obviously
I'm
the
sure you're
door's
going to
be
rethink that
closed.
one. I'm sure your
Yeah.
client's going to ask you to when we leave here tonight.
Right,
But
right, exactly, that door's gonna stay closed.
no further questions. Oh, wait, maybe I do. That elm tree and the reason for this thing to be pulled forward. Has the city arborist looked at that? Maybe that's a question for Kathy. Is your concern during the construction that this tree may have a 50-50 chance in the first place? And if it does, and we're pushing it too close to the street, have we considered thinking this all through in advance of making us approve a front setback situation here?
You know, I've had an arborist look at it. I think maybe that is a good question for the city arborist. I mean, it looks like in really good shape. It doesn't look to be, it is pretty large. I don't know how much life it has left. I feel confident that we're gonna be able to save it, because right now, you know, there is a house it's grown next to. You know, if by pulling the house away, I think that would not affect it at all, you know, in my opinion, because the root structure is already blocked by the house that's there. So I think by moving it forward, it's gonna be very protected, you know, in my opinion.
That's
I have another question. And as you know, we all appreciate being under bulk, but I wasn't sure if the whole 1.5-story scheme was to stay under bulk. And my concern is it looks like a lot of the bedrooms have very little space that's full height. And and I see that the basement is, you know, more than 9 feet or something. So is that something you would, you know, calculated and considered in terms of the height of that second story?
If we did raise the roof or the wall heights, it would increase the bulk
Right.
of the house. So so yes, we carefully considered it. We like the character of the shorter knee walls punctuated by the dormers and window seats. We think that adds a lot of character to those rooms.
Okay.
And we consider those walls, it's tall enough for dressers. So you couldn't put a bed with a big headboard across it, but we've got full height walls where we need to have them for beds. So from an interior standpoint, we're very comfortable with the layout of those bedrooms.
Does John, does the eastern side of the driveway change in location to existing?
The eastern side, no, it doesn't change. I guess it's just not gonna be as long, you know, because the garage is a little
Right,
bit
but the
forward.
eastern edge of that drive
I
is
believe it's the
basically the
same.
same location?
I believe it's the same location.
It seemed when I saw the flags in the yard, where the northeast corner, I'm sorry, the eastern corner of the garage would be, yes, the northeastern corner of the garage. There's a yellow flag marking that position. And then the knee wall extends from that to the east, correct?
Correct, correct.
Boy, when I eyeballed it, it sure looked like the driveway was gonna have to go further east than its present location, but, and if that's the case, there is a tree on the eastern side of that existing drive, a rather large tree that would
Right.
probably have to come out, but, and then you'd also be squeezing the property line. So what is the setback? Do you know what the setback in your proposal is from the driveway to the property line?
You know, I'd have to, I'm gonna give a guesstimate. I'm gonna look at something that I can hopefully give you a somewhat accurate dimension.
Is this
It's more
existing?
than 20 feet. It's 25 feet from the edge of the driveway to the property line. I do have the driveway fairly wide in front of the garage, and that can be narrowed. It doesn't need to be probably that deep, but I think we're just trying to keep that curb cut and that driveway configuration in the same location.
Right.
So we're working with that. So I think that really has a lot of impact on
All right.
what we do. Yeah, we want to keep that tree that you're mentioning, that's to the east.
That's the plan, to
Yeah,
keep that tree?
yeah.
Okay. Any more questions from the board? Hearing none, now is the opportunity for the public to address this petition. If there's anyone who would like to step forward and comment, please do so.
I just have one comment to make.
Ma'am, if you could step forward to the microphone and identify yourself.
You could use this one if you like.
Thank you. I'm Dorothy Gottschalk. I live on the the west side of the street in the ranch house. And I'm surrounded by two berms. The back one from on Wednesday, excuse my voice, on Wednesday Acres built, my neighbor built a berm. So I have a berm and a berm. And we have one sewer that goes between the Moore's property and our property and goes down to kind of a drain. And we're concerned a little bit at times when the soil erodes and goes into that drainage. That's a problem. But also with the two berms, I'm getting water up to my two large trees in back, which are two large elm trees. So I'm concerned about what's going to happen to the soil that's coming out of the basement, what's being dug up for a basement. And I think if that property is raised at all, I might have two swimming pools in my backyard. I have one now. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gottschalk. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to comment? Seeing no one, I would ask if the petitioner would like to respond to Ms. Gottschalk's comments.
I understand her concerns. I feel that we're not going to negatively impact the drainage on the site. You know, we do have a full basement, but I think it's still almost an acre, and I think there's plenty of retention on that property to hold it. And we're not going to raise the house, so it's going to be standing out of the ground. It's just going to be 2 steps, you know, kind of a normal 1 foot above ground elevation. So we're certainly not going to do any grading that's going to shed water onto the neighboring properties. We are going to have a civil engineer the site and make sure that the drainage is all supposed to be in the right spot, and the city engineers will review that as well. So our intention is not to exacerbate any issues that may be existing.
Sure.
Is the driveway all proposed to be asphalt?
Yes.
Does staff have any comment with respect to the neighbor's concern?
I believe that overall, the grading on this site is not going to be changed much. We have not yet received a civil drawing, but that is a stated intent, and the city engineer most of the time looks at plans and tries to retain the existing topography. That's what our code instructs us to do. Certainly, we will note in the records the concern of Ms. Gottschalk and make sure that the city engineer pays particular attention to that side of the property. But the fact that the grade on this property isn't changing really is significant, because if the grade was changing even a little bit, this is an area, this is a low area, a low part of the community, so drainage is a concern. But we believe the minimal change proposed on this property and any additional drainage improvements, drain tile, whatever that will be required for this new house will certainly not add any water to the neighboring properties.
Kathy, is there a storm sewer on Wentzia?
There are storm sewers in the area. I can't tell you exactly where they are, but yes, this area has storm sewers as opposed to some other areas that just have ditches.
Thank you, Kathy. Are there any final questions from the board to petitioner or staff? Hearing none, then let's go to discussion with respect to this petition.
Drainage and water, and actually, when I went out to the property, the very first thing I wrote down when I pulled into the driveway was low. That this is lower than anything to either side and across the street and that kind of thing. You know, knowing what water does, that was my biggest concern, and to hear Mrs. Gottschalk suggest that, you know, she's getting water, and I think she was maybe holding a bit of her tongue and maybe underestimating. There's a big berm in the backyard that runs along, I guess that would be 41 over there, that, I mean, the thing's as big as a building in itself, but you know, you put another berm someplace else, and you put another berm someplace else, and now all of a sudden, you know, you're creating or exacerbating potential water problems, and certainly don't want that to happen to a neighbor as a result of this. And when I looked at this house too, and I think part of the structural report is that, you know, there's water issues, and a house will over time settle. A homeowner will over time make the yard a little bit taller than it started with by landscaping, and you know, what I'm seeing here on the site plan is a new construction, which is gonna, I mean, any civil engineer worth his salt is gonna pull this thing out of the ground enough that water isn't gonna be a liability for him. I'm looking at foundation plantings just ringing this building that are gonna have mulch after mulch after mulch after mulch, and plant material that keeps sending the pad around the building up. I'm seeing a large driveway that, again, any civil engineer worth his salt is going to take that driveway and give it a pitch to the street to shed the water when it rains. He's not going to pitch it into the building. That suggests to me right away that the front of this house is subject to you know, a migratory landing zone, but I don't know what the backyard's doing. I don't know its relationship to the houses on either side, so I'm going to suggest that we see engineering on this before I'm willing to give it my approval, just from the standpoint of the water issue being, you know, it's going to be approved by somebody at the city engineer looking in this. I'm not going to buy it, and I don't think, I think I'd like to see the presentation come before us. There's, you know, that's my big concern for the, doing my duty for the sake of the neighbors in the neighborhood. I think the house, too, we talked about, you know, it might be too close to the street. The house is in the neighboring block or 4 houses over on either side. Some of them are smaller and older and lower, and And certainly the trend on Wensia is an improvement of aging architecture, and so this in itself is consistent, I think, with the future of Onwensia. It is tall, but I noticed that you know, the roof has been flattened off, and there's an attempt at dropping the eaves and that kind of thing that's suggesting that John's trying to pull it down, trying to give it a bit of a cottage look to it. I'm not excited by the difference that I see in the perspective drawing with the big trees out in front and all that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe that's 20 years from now, but I'm looking at a site plan that's got a bunch of 4-inch, you know, maples. The thing about Onwensia when you drive down the street in general is that these larger homes are scaled down by the large trees that surround them. This property being low is not supporting larger trees. It wouldn't. A larger tree would blow down in the windstorms that we've had recently, the elm excluded. There's something about the scale of the trees and the information on the size that I think we ought to consider. If these trees are going to be scaling down the drawing, they ought to be bigger than 4 inches in diameter. Architecturally, I think I like the brick, I like the color. I mean, the Chicago Common, you know, Maddie, it's a beautiful brick. It's highly sought after. I don't know if you're using real Chicago Common or something look-alike, but it's got a really soft and nice character to it, and I appreciate that on this. I think John has more. Well, I know he has more design talent than the quality of the level of detail that I'm seeing. I'm looking at this as something that could go a little bit farther, John, as I mentioned in my question time, that you know, you had talked about a belt course or something like that, and you had talked about something at the eave line that might have include a little brick detail. I think too with the chimney cap, I mean, a Rolock capped off by a couple of the Rolocks is something that I think you can go farther with a simple detail and get you know, get a substantially better house. And then Monica, the jack arch, this is just a simple soldier course. I think the jack arch would be more appropriate, something that had a little bit more defined, a little bit more beef to it. You know, you've got the heavy timber over some of the windows, and I just think that soldier course is going to get lost. I think if you did do a true jack arch that maybe flattened off at the top, it would be more consistent with the timber that you have there. I don't like the little triangular vent in the middle of the roof. I think that's just out of place, and maybe there's a different, you know, you go to Coppercraft, you might see a different arch vent or something, or copper vent that's more appropriate for the French style. And then you know, trying to fake me out with a panel above the arched windows. I mean, this is an important street, and I think you know, it deserves something more than a metaphor. I think it deserves a reality on an arch window. If you're going to put an arch top on it, put an arch window in it, would be my recommendation. And I'd like to just see it more playful. I look at this thing, and everything there's a center line to every window. There's a nice, and I think what did you call it, a asymmetrical balance. I agree. I think you've got the balance, the scale. I think the articulation, the rhythm of windows and voids. I think, you know, as far as our ordinance and what we look at here is, I think you've accomplished that. I'd like you to take it a little further, because I know you're capable of coming in with something that's a little bit more thought out than just, you know, the round balls on the top of the thing. I think, and then the iron that looks like it's like you ran out of ink when you were drawing it and needs more or something. I just think there's 5 or 6% of creativity that's lacking in what I'm seeing here. So given that, I'm worried and would like to have this revisited based on the engineering. I'd like to see it come back with just an extra little something that makes it country French versus something formal French.
Thank you, John. Maddie?
My main concern about the house is the massing of it in relation to the rest of the streetscape. I'm a big proponent of ranch houses. I live in one, and I think there's still a place for them in the community. I'm not saying that you need to save this one and keep it a ranch, but I think you need to be a little more sensitive to the other houses on either side of it, which are considerably lower and might be there for another 30, 40, 50 years if they're well maintained. And it's an attractive house, but I just think the size of it kind of sticks out down in that part of Valencia Road. I think, a little further to the east where the houses are bigger and taller is one thing, but right here I have some problems with the height of it.
Thank you, Maddie. John, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's an attractive house. Absent any staff recommendations, I hear what you're saying, John. I think there are some design elements here that you could say you could tinker here or there, but again, it's kind of a cost issue, maybe a taste issue, and I don't see anything really glaringly wrong with this design that I couldn't approve it. As far as Maddie's concerned, I understand what you're saying, because you're right. The two adjacent houses are certainly ranches, but you go a couple houses in either direction, and the houses on Valencia this is small compared to a lot of the houses on Valencia. So I guess I don't have a problem with the bulk. It's underneath the bulk itself, and it is 70 feet back from the setback. It only needs to be 50. So, two sides to every coin. I don't have a big problem with this design, nor the bulk. And as far as John's issue on the drainage, it certainly is a concern. But as I'm a board member here, I'm not a civil engineer, and I think there are, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, but there are checks and balances in place where there are reviews of that kind of system. We've kind of got to let those people do their job. We're commenting on the architecture is how I see our purview here. So I would not hesitate to approve this subject to a civil versus having to have the civil before I approve it, because I feel there's other people out there that will do that job and have that charter to do that. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Monica?
There's a lot of things I agree with you on. I mean, I'm in agreement with all the drainage. I think staff can handle that, and they always do a fine job with that. And going with the bulk, I think that this lot allows you to build a certain amount of area. So if they don't do it now, somebody's going to do it in the future. And by code, they're allowed to do it. They're under bulk. So I think the proportion and the scale of the home is appropriate. For the architectural style, I think John's very consistent, mostly consistent, with it being a French, it's more of a formal French country house. And so the only problem I kind of see with it is the cupola. I think that's not quite, with the style, but it certainly wouldn't stop me from, approving the petition. I think the symmetry and the alignment of all the windows is just right. I mean, a little bit more detail would be fine, but in its the simplicity of the form right now, I think is wonderful, and it's kind of refreshing to see something that's not overly complicated. The jack arch and the timber, head detail, I kind of wish they were both the same. I want them to face the same direction, but again, that wouldn't stop me from voting for the petition. The colors, the cream city brick is a beautiful color. The vent, the triangular vent, I too thought, I didn't really like it in the line drawing, but when you saw it in the rendering, then it seemed to make a little bit more sense. But if it could be arched, maybe that would be a little bit better. But again, that's just a small detail. I'm mostly really in favor of the petition. I think it's a nice job.
Thank you, Monica. Peggy?
I still do have a concern about the drainage, and while we need to defer in the big picture to staff to make sure that's done, you know, it's always a concern of neighbors and people that come before us to the board, so I think it's our due diligence to put it in our notes and, you know, make it record to be sure that we're asking staff to follow up closely on that. This area does get a lot of water, significant amount of water. And while they're not changing the grade, you're adding impervious surfaces. So it will change the water in that area. And I think that's a huge concern. And I think that we really need to ask staff to take a very close look at that. I think, you know, John was absolutely right about that. And that was one of my concerns at the beginning. And, you know, maybe they would consider a driveway material being, you know, a little bit different, at least in portions of it. Because, like I said, it's a huge area that gets a lot of water.
And you can say all day long that you're not changing grade, but you are. You're going to.
I agree.
And this is the low piece of property as far as I can see it. Now, again, I'm not out there with a transit surveying it. This was an eyeball situation. If there appeared any place for water to go in a low spot, I'd be all over. I'd say, well, no problem. Our qualified engineers can handle this.
I think you've made the point.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I didn't make any indication that this doesn't meet with our guidelines.
Understood. Peggy, would you like to continue?
Yes, I was still also concerned about the massing also. And, you know, as Maddie pointed out, we are talking about some ranches on either side. And yes, it may change, but I think pulling it forward is really what's going to make the massing look that much bigger. I think it's, you know, and because it's also a little bit wider, you know, you're not deeper. It's the streetscape. I actually have concern about the whole streetscape because it's going to be wider and it's going to be bigger and it's going to be closer to the street. Mm-hmm. You know, had some of the footprint of the house gone further back, then maybe that would alleviate that look. But I think it's a big concern.
Thank you. I have a few comments. First, I'd like to commend the petitioner on what I consider to be very nearly a model petition. The demolition request is as thorough as I've ever seen and as well-reasoned as I've ever seen. You obviously went to great lengths to consider alternatives to remodeling the existing structure. You provided a very thorough structural engineer's report detailing all the issues with the existing structure and made a very compelling argument for the demolition. And having seen a number of them over the years, this one was actually conscientiously pursued, very conscientiously pursued. So I commend the petitioner with respect to the demolition request. With respect to the replacement structure, I think I share a lot of Charlie and Monica's thoughts. I appreciate the simplicity of the design. I think it's very proportional. I think it's perfectly a perfectly good idea for the petitioner to consider some of the design element suggestions that have been made by various board members. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's really our role to design the structure for you. As somebody said, there's some questions of taste there. And the property owner should have some latitude there, in my estimation. But that said, I think personally that, you know, a balcony grill with a little more ornamentation on it probably would enhance the structure. And I would ask you to consider all of those suggestions that were made, whether you deem it appropriate to incorporate those or not. These folks are architects and they have some good ideas occasionally. So I would ask you to take them under consideration. I, however, would not necessarily make them a condition for approval. Similarly, I would not ask you to bring this petition back with an engineering report. I agree with Charlie's point that, and Peggy, in fact, that if we make an approval of this petition conditional upon approval by the city engineer with respect to drainage on the property and with respect to the construction, even taking into account John's thoughts that, the grading may change slightly as a result of construction of the replacement structure. With respect to the streetscape, again, I think 70-foot back when 50 is required is quite ample. I do agree that this would help protect the elm. I did stand in the backyard, and 41 is an issue with respect to noise. It appears to me now that the front yard currently is bigger than the backyard, and this would offer more balance for the owner by enlarging his backyard. I do also feel, as I looked at the flags, that the home is relatively even with the home to the west in terms of the location of the front edge of the elevation. So I don't really have, and I would also note not only further down the block on that side of the street, but directly across the street from this residence is a much larger structure as well. So this is not, in my estimation, going to really disrupt the streetscape materially. So I would wholeheartedly endorse this petition, both the demolition request and the replacement structure, and about the only condition I would make is that we do make it conditional upon a city engineer's report. So that's my position, and
Sticking to it.
I'm wondering if we need to add, I've proposed one condition that I think we can probably all agree on, which is subject to city engineer's approval with respect to drainage. But to emphasize that, because I think Peggy's concerns about the potential for issues there is significant, and we want to address Ms. Gottschalk's concerns as well. So make that a very serious part of the motion. But I'm not sure I would add anything else as a condition of approval.
And Lloyd, I just want to, make it clear, as I discussed my concerns, they're certainly not criteria for my approval or disapproval. It was just that, and I don't want to be the designer, and I don't want to have a subjective opinion presented here tonight, but I just think there's some areas where, clearly there's an arch being indicated that is, somewhat of a faux approach to putting an arch above a window. And there's some flat areas there's some shed dormers occurring that have flat windows, and then there's some arched dormers occurring that also have flat windows. So it's just
Does anybody else feel that
detail issue?
There's a detail,
but I have
elemental detail with respect to some of those comments that should be incorporated into the
I think they should be
approval of the
considered.
petition?
I'm not asking that they be incorporated as a contingency to our approval.
Okay.
I'm just seeing that there's some things here that I think should be considered to make this project better tomorrow than it is today. And I'd like the petitioner to take them in stride and in heart, and then go forth and build. But the drainage issue, I'm more than happy to pass that over to the city engineer, but absolutely as a contingency to my approval tonight.
Okay.
Chairman Culbertson, I have two suggested conditions based on your discussion, if you'd like to
Please.
hear some suggested language. I would suggest adding a new condition number 1, not in place, but in order of priority. Condition number 1 would now read: the grading and drainage plan shall be reviewed with careful attention to the additional stormwater runoff that will be generated by the increased impervious surface, the lowness of the site, and with particular consideration given to the potential for any off-site impacts due to a change in the rate or amount of stormwater runoff from the site. A second condition that would direct staff to review the set of permit drawings to verify refinement and enhancement of details as discussed, both as mentioned by the architect and with consideration given to the board's comments.
Thank you, Kathy. Is the board in agreement with those two recommendations, that they be incorporated into
Yes.
the motion? I think that's
Yes.
very helpful. Thank you, Kathy. Is there anything else we would like to include? If not, then I would suggest we have a motion with respect first to the demolition request. Would somebody like to
I
make that
move
motion?
to approve the demolition request and appreciate the comprehensive report that John did, or that his engineer did.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. That motion has passed. And now, with respect to the replacement structure, may I have a motion?
I move to approve the replacement structure located at 345 West on Wensier Road with all the recommendations set forth in the staff recommendation, to include the two that staff had just proposed in the order that they were proposed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Take it to a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. The petition has been approved. Thank you very much, John, for your fine work. Good
Thank
luck-
you very much.
Good luck
Good
with the
evening.
project.
I know, thanks.
Does anybody need to take a break? Would anybody like to take a break?
Okay.
Peggy, John?
Accepted.
Maddie, do you need to take a break?
I just need to stand for a minute.
You know, I'm gonna, thank you. I'm gonna suggest a 3-minute break, okay? All right? We are going to adjourn for about 3-5 minutes, take a brief break, and we'll return momentarily. Thank you. The next item on the agenda this evening is preliminary consideration and direction on a request for construction of a new single-family dwelling on a vacant lot at 27 West on Wensia Road. The owners are Rajul and Gopal Balala, and the representative is Mike Minchillo, architect. Is that you, sir?
That is not,
Oh.
but I will introduce myself.
If you would,
Yes.
please.
And my name is Robert Churchill. You can call me Bob. Mr. Chairman, if you want to call me Mr. C, that's okay too. I'll take your lead on that. So, I'm an attorney with a law firm, Churchill, Quinn, Rickman, and Hamilton, from Grayslake, Illinois. In fact, our law firm is, I believe, the oldest law firm in Lake County. With my grandfather, father, brother, and cousin, we've been on the same corner in downtown Grayslake for 107 years. So I've spent a few times in front of boards, and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. And thank you for your service as you do this and give up your evenings for this. My clients are Dr. and Mrs. Balala. They have been residents of Lake Forest for 21 years, 15 years living next to Mrs. Balala's family in the Pond subdivision, and the last 6 years living at 303 South Green Bay Road. They've lived in the community, they've raised their family here. The property, which is the subject of this petition, has been owned by them for 20 years. Tonight we have assembled our team to make this presentation to you. I've taken the liberty of giving you a copy of everyone's business cards so that you will know who comprises the team. From Manhart Consulting, Mr. Glenn Christensen, the senior planner, who's our landscape architect, and Peter Storr, who will present our animation and 3D model. Sean Purnell is our architect. Bud Reed from Reed Engineering is our engineer. Mike Minchillo from MTM is our general contractor. And Mrs. Balala is here with us tonight. Unfortunately, Dr. Balala got called out of the country on a family emergency. Our goal tonight is to present you with your first look at the home which we would like to build on this property. Before we go any further in our process, we would seek your input, your thoughts, and suggestions on how we should proceed. The property is a vacant lot located at 27 West on Wensia Drive. It's approximately 1.88 acres in size. This is a buildable lot. This is also what I believe you call a back lot. The property can barely be seen from the street due to the house on the front lot. In fact, I doubt that the house, when it is constructed, will at all be visible from the street. The design of the house to be constructed on this lot was done to comply fully with all laws and regulations of both FEMA and the City of Lake Forest. As we originally presented the project to the city, we did not believe that any variance or special use permit would be necessary. What makes this property so beautiful and yet provided challenges for both the design of the house and the use of the land is its capacity to hold water. If you've walked the property, you've seen that it is somewhat like a very flat bowl or dish. So the house has been designed to accommodate the intrusion of water. In fact, the engineering of the lot has been done in such a way that the lot will actually provide site storage of water that cannot be accommodated as the property sits today. The project has passed FEMA inspection, and our engineers are here tonight to answer any questions that you may have regarding the engineering of the lot. The design of the house is unusual but beautiful. Because of the long driveway, there really is no streetscape. Unfortunately, the beauty of the house will not be able to be expressed to passers-by. I would ask at this time if Glenn Christensen and Peter Stowe would show you our animation of the house.
Thank you, Bob. Again, my name is Glenn Christensen. I'm senior landscape architect and planner for Manhart Consulting, and have been part of the design team. I think first of all, Peter's done an excellent job putting together a 3D animation, and I think we'll run that real quick to give you a little background on the layout of the house on the lot, as well as some of the architecture. Just a note about the architecture, I would look at the drawings versus this particular 3D display is in concern with the detail. However, it's a pretty good job. With that, if you could turn it on. This is a view coming from the north into the site. If you'll note the grade changes on site to accommodate the floodplain and floodway. With that, if you give me the site plan. Might add that the previous project, I know you talked about drainage, and you talked about architecture to really start that project off. In this particular case, drainage is the driving force. Can you give me the site plan? Yeah. And as Bob mentioned, this is a flag lot, or a lot in depth. Valencia Road is located right here. We have about 45 feet of width that runs down the flag portion. It breaks open a little larger here and then comes to the bulk of the lot. There are 3 existing houses in the area. There's the house here that enters directly off of Valencia. The newer house, which is located here to the east, takes access directly from Valencia in front. And then this lot next to it to the east is also a lot in depth or flag lot, which has a driveway over a little further east here. There are a number of things that are the driving force on the site plan of this, and particularly we have a 20-foot setback line, which is right here, and we have a 50-foot setback line, which is right here, and we have the regulatory floodway, which is right here. This is our building box right here. The existing floodplain line runs through this area this way right here. We've been working on this site for approximately a year. It's a challenge in regards to the floodplain, and through the engineering and through our FEMA CLOMAR request, we were allowed to do some fill to bring the driveway in and to bring the courtyard into the front of the house right here. In so doing, we had to provide compensatory storage in other areas of the lot, which we did. We feel we're in a position now that the design works drainage-wise, and we're trying to work the design of the house and the remainder of the site to work all together. We have been working the whole design team together to get to this point, and in talking with the staff, their suggestion to come here on a preliminary basis, I think was a good idea, not only to exchange information and talk about the site, but to get feedback from you as well. Bob talked about the lack of really any visual look from Valencia Drive to the house. It's about 409 feet from Valencia Drive to the front of the house. Through here, there's existing trees that border the entryway along here, as well as existing plant material in the back of the lot here. We've done a tree survey. I believe the village arborist or the city arborist has looked at it. There really isn't a lot of quality plant material there. However, we're trying to save as much of it as possible and to add additional plant material as part of the design of the house. If we go to the landscape plan very quickly. Okay. Just very quickly, the house location here. The dark pattern that you see here would be the provision where sod would be placed. The remainder of the lot in the back here would be we're proposing a wet mesic prairie mix. We're trying to keep a very natural look in the back of the house, and because of the flooding conditions there, that this is a mix that we use in a lot of stormwater management areas. We're going to augment the existing plant material with new plant material that can handle getting its feet wet and is conducive into areas like that. The driveway, the clients are very concerned about impact of permeable surfaces. Can you blow up the driveway a little bit? The proposed driveway calls for 2 bands of permeable pavers on either side, and in the middle of the paver will be grasscrete, that concrete matrix that has grass growing within it. So the entire driveway is permeable. These little bump outs that you see were done at the request of the client because it is such a long driveway, to allow a car to go to the side while another one is passing. These bump outs would look just like turf. You wouldn't see it. You'd have the concrete underneath it, the turf. So they're really, the only image of pavement you'll see are the 2 ribbons of permeable pavers for the wheels. As you get down farther, can you pull them down a little farther? Yeah. As you get down farther, we have a kind of a land bridge here that will be all permeable pavers, with one garage here and another garage here and a backup area. This area is lower on each side, and there will be a railing or a fence that runs along the edge of the kind of a drop off that's there. Existing fencing, the whole majority of the east property line has 6 or 7 foot stockade fence now. Our proposal for fencing would start at the wooded section here and run along the property here, run down here, and right to the edge of the floodway where we have to stop. I hear the buzzer. Can you get me to the building scale? We've run into an issue with the building scale. Under the current calculations, staff has calculated that we're running about 2,200 square feet over the building scale or quantities of bulk. The reason for that is that of the exposed back area of the house. Under definitions, anything over 3.5 feet is considered in the bulk if you have an exposed basement wall or crawl space wall, which we have here. I might add that under the house here, the crawl space is not going to be inhabitable. There's not going to be any mechanical equipment or anything. That will be allowed to take water. You see the vents located on the side of the foundation here. Water will be allowed to come in, and then water will be allowed to come out as part of this design because of the floodplain situation. Even though it's not inhabitable, based on the calculations requirements, we have to include that in the bulk calculations, which if this site would be a normal site, we would have a normal basement and we wouldn't have that situation because we wouldn't have the exposed wall on the back of the house. We looked at a few different ways of dealing with that. We're not very comfortable with any of them, quite frankly. And I think at this time we're going to ask your opinion or see what your feelings are for asking for a variation in the bulk requirement because of the site conditions. I think because of this, I think we qualify under some of the standards for a variation for bulk because of this situation. We do have our entire design team here, including architect. And I know our time, 10 minutes is up, and we're here to answer any questions if you wish.
Very considerate of you to consider the time restraint,
Okay.
but given the complexity of this petition, I think what might be appropriate now is for the architect to perhaps review the elevations and the design details. Would that be agreeable with you guys?
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sean Purnell. I'm the architect for this project.
I'm sorry, what was your last name?
Purnell.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay.
Who's Mr. Minchello?
Mr. Michello's back there.
Oh, okay. Is he,
Mrs. Bilal.
is he the architect or no?
No, he's the contractor.
Ah,
Sean Purnell. The reason I've given you the business cards is so that you can have an idea who we all are. Sean Purnell is the architect.
all right. Very good. Thanks for the clarification. Proceed.
Thanks. Obviously, a lot of the design decisions are springing immediately from, obviously, the homeowner's desire for a French eclectic / French country style of home, coupled with the fact that we're not presenting any sort of a typical streetscape frontage. The lot is stacked in a very unusual way, and with the floodway cutting through the rear portion of the home, we had to propose some creative solutions for how to get the garages to work, for example, and how to get a very unusual offset axis drive to work. So we chose an architectural style that allowed itself to be balanced without relying on symmetry or a form that would be very difficult to achieve given the lot constraints. So we've tried to keep the massing of the home as simple as possible given those constraints. We've tried to present a 1.5-story design scheme that tries to soften the bulk as much as is possible. And the stone, that we've selected stone and brick with copper accents throughout the elevations of the home, and the archtop windows with copper accent dormers.
Oh, absolutely.
I kind of figured you might have a question or something.
Yeah,
So.
we will. We're going to ask staff to comment on, give us their thoughts on the
Sure.
petition.
Okay.
And then we'll go to questions. So, thank you very much. Staff, would you like to report on this petition?
Thank you, Chairman Culbertson. First, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on this lot. It is a property that city staff has been working with the petitioners and their various representatives on for, someone said a year, but my recollection is it's been much longer than a year. It's a very, very complicated property. It is impacted by floodway and floodplain, and as was stated, it is a buildable lot. However, if this property came in today to be subdivided under our current subdivision code, this lot could not be created because no portion of it is unencumbered by floodway or floodplain. Given that, there is a process through FEMA that allows for a request for a map amendment. And that process has been undertaken, and there has been conditional approval granted by FEMA. That is not something that's under the city's control. The city engineer has been involved in reviewing the various communications and plans that have been sent to FEMA. From the city engineer's perspective, this is not a lot that we would recommend that someone build on. However, it is a buildable lot, and given that we are working through the regulatory process, and with FEMA's approval of the final regrading of the site, we will then be authorized to issue a building permit. So the drainage issues on this property or I guess I should say the drainage issues on the previous property you saw pale in comparison to this site. But again, the regulatory processes on this property are out of the control of the city. We have reviewed this matter with the city attorney, and at the point that we do issue a building permit, there will be a disclaimer put on any approvals granted by the city engineer, just simply because of the magnitude and complexity of this property. So there will be an acknowledgement that FEMA has granted the approvals. Certainly the city engineer will do everything he can to assure that there are no off-site impacts either upstream or downstream. But again, this property holds a tremendous amount of water. It is not a little wet, and in very serious rainstorms, it's a lake. So that's why the house you see in front of you really is different from, I believe, anything else that has ever come before you. There are some unique architectural features. This property will be almost completely regraded, and various portions of the site will need to be lowered to provide for compensatory storage, because this site, even after development, will still need to continue to hold the same amount of water that it currently holds. And that's the reason that you see some of those rectangular openings near the base of the foundation, so that in extreme storms, which we seem to have more and more often, the 100-year storms or the 10-year storms seem to come at least once a year. But the water during those times will infiltrate this site, could fill up the depressions on either side of the driveway, and fill up the area under the house. So I just wanted to point out that this property is very unique. As was mentioned, this property is also a lot in depth, so it has some other challenges that come into play. The area of the access easement does not count toward the building scale calculation. In addition, as was noted, lots in depth have larger setbacks than normal, so that's why you really have a building pad that is very, very limited, and the house is essentially squeezed into the area in which you see it proposed. I know that Ms. O'Neill has met with, I believe, Mr. Purnell to discuss building scale. At this point, we didn't have detailed enough drawings and fully understand all the complexities, the heights of the different walls in the different areas, to fully and accurately give you a building scale calculation. We do estimate that this project is over building scale by about 2,000 square feet. That appears to be, as was noted, mostly in the lower level. We don't know that for sure, but that appears to be the issue. With new homes, the board, as a matter of practice, rarely, if ever, has granted building scale overages. This property does have some unique aspects, but that lower level does certainly add to the appearance of mass of the house. So you do have a request before you for, or not a request, but you have you've been asked for input on whether a variance would be appropriate, and it would be appropriate to give that direction and also to indicate perhaps the magnitude of the variance. Again, I don't have the exact numbers, but the overage of this as currently designed and as we currently understand it probably is in the range of about 25%. I mentioned that a large part of the lot will be regraded, although there's not, in the majority of the center of the lot, there really is not significant vegetation. There is some heavily wooded areas of not necessarily high quality vegetation, but certainly along the creek and along the perimeters, the west and the south perimeters of the site. Those areas, I believe, will not be touched. The landscaping that can be planted once the project is done is also limited, because these areas do need to be able to take water. So the landscaping on this site will need to be reviewed not so much by our certified arborist, who would normally review landscaping plans, but by the city engineer, and if requested by FEMA as well, so that we're not reducing the storage volume of the various areas that are created on the site. Given the lengthy discussion, staff did recommend that at this point we bring this project before you for input on the building scale in particular, input on the overall chosen architectural style, the consistency of the style, the materials, the relationship to this unique site. So tonight we are not looking for any decision, looking for what additional materials you want to see from us. From staff's perspective, the 3D image certainly helps. We've mentioned it on a couple of occasions, but we also believe that an actual simple massing model could also really help staff as well as the whole project team to fully understand exactly what is proposed on this site, understand the grade changes and how all the aspects of this project will work together and how it will interface with the immediate properties. The creek is to the west, but the immediate properties to the east and to the north. With that, I would just invite your direction and input, and this is a challenging one, so appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you, Kathy. It's time for questions from the board to petitioner or staff. I imagine there might be a few. Who'd like to start? Peggy?
I have a few questions for the petitioners regarding, I'd like a better understanding of the drainage. So I understand that the lower level is designed to flood. Is that a storm trap situation?
I'm going to ask Mr. Bud Reed to come up. He's our engineer.
Certainly.
And perhaps he
Thank
can
you.
answer
Great,
that for you.
thank you.
You know, the lawyer can't answer any of these technical questions, so.
The water that occurs on this site, of course, is a direct result of the stream which overtops the embankment just on the west side of the property. So the water that enters the crawl space area does enter through the vents that are shown on the property, as you see on the side there. There are 8 vents that's associated with this entrance and exit of the water. So it is required as part of the grading plan that has kind of conditional approval from not only your staff but also from FEMA. And it's a conditional approval. We still have to go through a final approval with them.
Okay, I'm just asking questions for my own edification here and trying to better understand it. So how does the water travel out of that lower level?
It travels out the same way it comes in.
Okay.
Water goes in and out the same vents.
In and out the same vents?
Right. Now, I would like to say, too, that if you've been on the property, you know the property is very low.
Right.
We're lowering it slightly. We've mitigated some wetlands that are on the property, and we're adding drainage throughout the area. We're actually adding some additional compensatory storage over what's already there.
You have a detention pond on the corner there?
But it's not a detention pond,
Retention.
no. It's actually called compensatory storage. There's
Okay.
no detention that's required for it. It
Okay.
acts virtually the same way.
Will that water from, will that water that comes out from underneath the home go into that compensatory storage?
Yes, it'll go into the compensatory storage just on the west side of the home, into a storm sewer, and then out to the creek.
Okay, so how will it travel from there to there?
It travels through the vent system.
And it's just gravity?
Yes.
Okay. And then how out from the compensatory storage, is it expected to just recede, or do you have it going out to the ditch then? You have storm.
There's a discharge pipe that goes to the creek. As long as the creek is up, the water will stay in this low area that's on the property. As soon as the creek goes down,
Certainly.
the water goes down, just like it does now.
Will that be pumped then once it gets down to a low level, or will it just stay in there?
It's gravity. There's a
Okay.
pump inside the crawl space of the house that will eject some of the lower flows of water, but it won't operate during the course of the flood. It wouldn't do any good.
I understand that, but once the compensatory storage reaches a lower level, and you have it, okay, will it be pumped from there to the ditch, or that's just gravity also?
No, it's all gravity.
There's a storm manhole at this lower section.
And just a check valve, but once you get down to a certain level, that check valve's not gonna wanna work as well, once you're down to that low level.
No, actually, the check valve works very well. It's detailed in the engineering plans if you have the engineering plans, but yes, it does work very well.
Okay, is the structure on caissons?
The structure is not on caissons, no.
Okay,
It's on a regular foundation as shown here.
okay.
Could I just follow up on that? Let you go back for a second, but I just want to build on this.
Okay, yeah.
Do you mind?
No, go ahead.
I'm just curious, why do you want to go through all this? This is like, wow. There will be water floating underneath the house. There'll be a moat around the house, right?
Yeah, Dr. and Mrs. Balala have owned the property, as I've said, for about 20 years. They've always had an intention to build on the property, but for various reasons they haven't. Now their family has grown, and they would like to downsize from the house that they have on Green Bay Road, and this is their dream property to build this house. And so Mrs. Balala and the doctor have provided input to all of the professionals here to try and build their dream retirement house. So that's
fair enough.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Peggy. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So what is that rendering accurate to the elevation of those vents?
The requirement is that the vents be within 1 foot of existing grade.
Okay.
They can be raised or lowered, probably be put right at grade that's there now.
Okay, that's why I asked. Okay, thank you. And then you show a drain tile around the house. Is that correct? There's additional drain tile?
There will be some drain tile that will take roof water. There'll be some tile that will, in the driveway, right, there's actually a tile that runs all the way.
Looks like at the foundation base, am I seeing that correctly?
That would be an architectural.
Which drawing you're looking at?
I'm on the typical wall section. I'm asking about this drain tile. It's shown above, you're showing it above your interior subgrade.
There should be just a standard footing drain tile that would
Okay.
collect groundwater
Okay.
and gutter water,
Okay.
roof only, so that doesn't take into a consideration any of the other engineering relating to the groundwater on site.
Right, I understand that, but you're showing it above your interior subgrade.
On the typical wall section, it looks like it's below the slab grade.
No, it should be below subgrade. Well, that's fine. I understand what it is. For the moment.
You can go.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
I just kind of want to follow up with the whole drainage through the basement. Are those vents, then are the bottoms of the vent at the top of the concrete slab? So when there is water in the basement, any water that is in the basement is going to directly be able to flow out the bottom of that vent? Because if there's any kind of curb, your water is just going to be sitting
Right.
in that basement, right? So
There'll be-
is that correct? They are sitting at the bottom?
At the floor level, yes.
At the floor level, okay. So then, only part of the basement is really configured to flood? Because like on the front part of the house, you don't have any of those vents. So any water that's coming in is going to come in on the back side of the house and then hopefully flow out. You know, there's only like 5 or 6 of, or no, there's quite a few, but nothing at the front of the house. Is that correct?
Correct. There's none at the front face, the north side of the home.
Okay.
They're all, there's 8 what's called quad vents. They're a special flood type vent that's made for this particular application.
And is the basement habitable? I mean, are there steps down to the basement at all?
It's a crawl space.
Okay.
It's 5.5 foot tall, and no, there will be no access from the habitable portion of the facility of the home to the crawl space.
And did you say there is a pump to try to get out? No, it's just all gravity fed, so it's all sloped to drain towards those vents.
It's gravity flow. However, there will be an access for a pump in the crawl space area, because eventually you're going to want to wash down this area.
Yeah, because it could
So
get moldy.
there'll be a way to evacuate the water.
Okay. That's all I have right now, just about the vent thing.
Well, let me follow up on that then. So it's sloped to only head toward the compensatory storage area. So the egress of the water is only one direction, is that correct?
It'll go out the same way it comes in.
But earlier, when I asked where the water headed to from the basement, you said it went to the compensatory storage, which is only in one area. So is the basement sloped to channel the water from under the building to that corner? And if so, then the water's only heading out in one direction, even though it may be coming in from more than one direction. Am I correct or not?
No, it can evacuate the same way it goes in, because of the height of the water is going to force the water out the same direction. As you get very low in the water levels, now keep in mind that water may get up to 3.5 foot of depth in the crawl space area. You have 5.5 foot there. So it may get up to 3.5 foot of depth in this crawl space area. So water will be forced out as it starts to recede out of all the vents. As it gets lower, it'll just be coming out of this side.
Okay.
But all of it will go to the compensatory storage area. The crawl space area is calculated as part of the compensatory storage area.
Okay.
Is there any system in your plans for taking care of mold and mildew and dampness even after the water is out of there and into the retention ponds and maybe even back into the creek? You're still going to have dampness, and I was concerned about mold and mildew and creeping up into the house. And
well, all the construction materials that's within the 5.5 foot are waterproof. So it'll be some type of material that is waterproof. Once you get outside the home, the materials outside the home with the type of plant material that we're going to have in the compensatory storage areas will absorb the water rather quickly. I don't expect there'll be any problem outside the home.
yeah, I wasn't so concerned outside as I was in the crawl space.
I certainly think this will be an area that'll be of concern, although you have to keep in mind you're looking at a flood that doesn't occur every week or every year that's going to inundate the basement or the crawl space area.
What type of flood is that calculated for?
It's generally calculated, it's probably going to start flooding in the 5-year flood.
It's a 5-year flood?
Right.
Great, thank you.
And it'll proceed upwards from there.
I understand.
Have you ever used these vents before?
Yes. This is a prevalent construction around the chain of lakes because of the low areas around the lakes.
Can these vents be closed either intentionally or accidentally?
I would imagine you could force close them, yes, but they're set up to automatically open and automatically
So
close.
they have flaps?
They swing.
So they
actually
swing based on the water pushing against them one way or another?
Horizontally, yes.
So there's no mechanical systems that anybody has to worry about failing?
No.
Are there any fans or anything in, to the point of mold and stuff? Are there any fans or dehumidifiers mechanically underneath there to
No.
treat the
Not to my
moisture that's in
knowledge,
the air?
Again, that would be a building construction. I'd check with the architect, but it's not planned.
Well,
As part of the architectural solution, as part of the architectural, the mechanical systems of the home, yes, there would be, I think we've anticipated an interior system that would,
In the home itself, but not
No,
directly
specific-
underneath into this compensatory
Well, we
storage crawl space?
correct.
Now, I noticed on your wall section detail, you have, as you talk about typical floor construction in this area, you've got your subfloor, you've got your floor trusses, and then you've got half-inch gypsum board ceiling. Is that the ceiling material that's in
No, that would
the
be that would
underside?
be
of-
the second floor, typical floor construction.
Okay. What material is the underside of the floor framing that's exposed to this humid, wet area?
There would be a waterproof membrane that would be attached on the,
Like a solid
Underside.
thing or a rubber rolled stock, something? Is it,
no, it would be a vapor barrier.
and is there, I'm assuming there's insulation in the floor that,
Correct.
as well? I guess my obvious question is why, but then I'll just say that and move on to my other questions. I mean, that's obviously unique and challenging and creative ideas presented here. So I commend you on that, but that's not a question. Could somebody define regulatory floodway for me? It's got an adjective in front of floodway, and I wonder if that's defining something specific or special. I know, I see the line, but I'm looking for a definition of the word.
The regulatory floodplain is actually that portion of the flood, the regulatory floodway is actually that portion of the floodplain, which is a much larger area, that carries a current, would be the best definition. So if you were to step into that area right there, you might feel a current on your leg.
So that creek that runs through there, I mean, that's the culprit, that's the bugger that's causing this creek to overflow that gets into the floodway that still by definition is part of the creek because it has a current until you expand even more into a floodplain, which suggests that that's just maybe more of a temporary water retention as it retreats back to the floodway and finally in a dry situation back to the creek itself.
That's
pretty good understanding?
Pretty good understanding, yes. The floodplain is considered the entire area that floods in a 100-year storm.
The floodplain is?
The floodplain is.
The floodway, we're suggesting might go every 5 years? Did I hear
No,
that?
the floodplain is the area where there's a current. It's inside the floodplain.
How often does that occur?
How often does the flood?
How often does the floodway that has current, how often does that have water with a current or water period?
Well, where it's at,
I see the blue.
This
I see the
location
blue
right
on the
here.
left hand, on the west side, yeah.
when
but-
it's at this location right here, this
Yeah.
is the 100-year floodway line during the 100-year flood.
Okay, then
So-
what happens to water that gets underneath the building? How often does that occur?
This will occur approximately every 5 years as it enters this area here.
All right, now you got me confused again. The blue, that's creek, right?
Yes, right here,
That's a creek.
right.
Now, that creek gets more water than it has in this picture, and it gets into that dotted line that you're calling floodway. Every 100
No.
years?
No.
No.
It'll be at this point, the 100-year flood is a 1% chance of occurring every year. That's kind of what it
Okay.
is.
All right. So that dotted line is going to happen every single year?
So if this happens this next year, then the flood is going to be back over here where this line is. This is where the water is actually going to be. The
Every
current
year?
is going to be in this area, same over here.
All right, so every year, this is going to hold water how many times?
This, I couldn't tell you, it depends on, this year, I think this spring, in May, there was a 3-inch rainstorm, pretty significant. There was water throughout this whole site. I think Kathy took some pictures of it at that location. We checked the rain data at that time. It was a 2-year rainstorm. It happened over 2
Right.
days. You got
So,
a 3-inch rain. rainfall.
If I might, and to get back to the floodway and floodplain, the floodplain is relative to elevation. So in other words, at a certain elevation, that's your floodplain. The floodway is more to flow. It doesn't necessarily follow a particular elevation. It's usually within a proximity of the stream, so it's, if that would take a little confusion away.
Okay, so that question's answered. You've described floodway. CLOMA-F as part of FEMA's letter. What does CLOMA-F refer to?
It's a conditional letter of map revision on fill. And the fill that's occurring on this site is this land bridge, this area right here,
Okay.
in the front courtyard.
All right, so FEMA has looked at this grading plan and approved it, is what I'm seeing your letter
Conditional,
indicates.
yes.
Conditional. Conditional on what?
Conditional on receiving a stormwater management permit from the city, and the contractor then allowing to put this fill in under strict construction conditions, submitting the information back to FEMA to get a letter of map revision for fill. Once we receive that letter of map revision, that's the actual permit from FEMA, that this fill is constructed properly, then we can apply for a building permit.
Okay, is staff willing to do that? Is that, did you say earlier that you'd be, engineering department would be submitting confirmation to FEMA?
Engineering at this point has also conditionally approved the site plan. So as
so
it moves
everybody's working
forward, every step in the process, as Mr. Reed noted, will be carefully monitored, and but right now there is conditional approval from both the city and FEMA.
Okay. And I think did I notice in here you had all the trees surveyed? I thought I saw that in this. I did.
Yes.
Now you're going to be changing grading. You know, you talked about how the trees are, as they exist, are shading or shielding this home from other homes. Now, you know, you did mention the visual look from Onwencia, and we're hundreds of feet back, and I have to tend to agree with you that nobody from Onwencia is going to see it. It obviously has a mass and a height, and one of my other questions is going to be this bulk overage, and where exactly it is, but I'll get to that in a minute. But you're going to be changing the grade of the site everywhere. So the trees that you've surveyed that are existing, are those all impacted by regrading of the roots around those?
No, they're not. If you look at the site here, there are a number of trees that border the flag portion here. A majority of those will stay.
Okay.
And a majority of the trees that kind of follow in this area right here will stay as well. There's not a lot of existing trees in this area in the center.
Right.
They're very few, in fact. And then we're taking some of the scrub box elders that are along this fence line out. But
Okay.
there'll be some grading in here, but they're really not going to take out a lot of the trees.
Okay, and the grasscrete and all of the efforts, and I see your details in here, that's all because you need to have a impervious surface to qualify for your FEMA
No,
approval?
not at all. That has nothing to do with it. That was purely the wishes of the client that they wanted to do
Okay.
that.
Good.
I might add that the entire site, we're about 10% impervious, which is pretty good for a site and a house this size.
Did you do appropriate soil compaction tests to see that this thing doesn't need to be on caissons?
I believe there's soil borings that have been done, and as far as the engineering goes, I'll send that to
We
Bud.
have entertained a soils consultant for the project, so as we
You don't know
construct the
yet.
fill, he will be consulted for any work that may be necessary for any caissons. At this time, we're not expecting it. There's a lot of sand on the site.
Do we need to make a contingency on soil borings for our for the city's purpose at all, or do we just leave that up to them?
I think that the engineering requirements will take care of that. But
Okay.
you can certainly You're
Well, I
not
just-
approving anything
From a
tonight,
legal
but it's
standpoint, do
certainly,
you care whether they put a house on bad soils, or should that be a contingency in our approval?
We do.
We're not.
Okay, all right.
We'll take care of that.
Oh, no, I know we're not, okay, we're not approving, we're just, okay. Well, anyhow, I would recommend you get soil borings on that. Exactly where, maybe this is a question for the architect, where is the bulk overage? And I know you talked about the 3.5 feet off of the grade and the percentage of perimeter versus the square footage, I understand that. But I'm also seeing an attic space that's got a substantial pitch to it. And then I guess, well, is there any attic space bulk to this house?
There is a small amount of third-story bulk.
Can you quantify that?
I don't have the exact figure. I want to say it's 330.
330 approximately?
Correct.
Is there a flat section of roof on that at all, or no?
No, there's not.
Okay.
No, it's
What is the pitch on that roof?
It's 12 primarily.
12 primarily or everywhere?
Primarily, except for the exterior veranda at the rear has a lower pitch.
And that's that big area to the top of your page?
Correct.
Just that first floor area or that second floor piece?
Just
the first floor area?
Correct.
So if you needed to get 330 square feet out, you could lower that pitch by 1 degree or 2 and be comfortable with
We have explored, and in order to comply with the bulk, not the lower level notwithstanding, we've reduced the pitch, we've reduced the floor-to-floor height. So we've had to reduce the building considerably because the maximum height, as you know, is measured from the existing grade, and we are essentially raising this house out of the ground 5 feet. So there is a 40-foot maximum height requirement, and the home is 40 feet from the rear grade, so the perception of the home from the front would be 35 feet, which is well under. If the lot were flat, the home would comply with the bulk ordinance. So you could argue that the extent that it is over is due to the fact that the grade, because of the requirements of the grading on the site, the grade drops at the rear of the home, which causes part of the inhabitable basement to be counted towards the bulk. And that is where the 2,200 square feet comes from. It's essentially all basement. Crawl space, sorry. Lower storage.
Okay, I have no other questions.
I have a question for staff. Kathy, has there ever been a structure on this property?
no.
Thank you.
What is this going to do, your grade changes and everything going to do to the neighboring properties? Particularly the one to the north and west of the proposed house, which is, I think, the closest structure to your, at the top of the screen.
All of the grade, you're talking about this structure here, which is
Yes.
the closest residential property. This is all sloped coming from here into this low area. As it is now, it's a little bit deeper now. Likewise, this comes into a low area here. This is all drained through piping back this way to another low area, which is several foot lower than the house. So it's all still draining the same direction as it is currently today. There won't be any impact on that piece of property.
Actually, we're probably defining the waterway better than it is now.
Better, okay.
And actually, the water has a place to go now where it really doesn't right now, so.
Okay, and what about the house to the east?
This property all drains toward here.
Okay,
So it's all coming into this low area. And I would like to say at this point too is that while we're placing 900 yards of fill in this area right here, we're compensating for 1,800 or 1,580 through these lower areas. So we're almost doubling the amount of storage that currently exists on this property.
but you're blocking the flow, the natural flow from the house to the east?
No,
It does, the water naturally flows to the west.
naturally flows this direction. It'll continue to flow this direction.
Okay, but you've got a house in the way. How's the water gonna get around the house?
Well, here's the drainage here. you can see in a 3D perspective that the water's coming through this low area right here and going around the house. It's coming through this area, right through here and around the house back over to the creek.
Okay. Okay.
I have another question. What is your finished floor elevation compared to the finished floor elevation of those two neighboring homes?
They're very similar in height. I looked at them just before I came in. I'm going to say within a half a foot. Both of them are within a half a foot of this elevation of this. I think we have it there, Glenn?
Yeah, that's, try to find it. 66121. Yeah, there's 6121 to the house to the north, and this one is 66145.
So this one's slightly higher, this one's 661 and a half.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
All right, this one to the north is 661.21.
Thank you.
Our house is 661.5. And the one to the east is
658.0.
652.45. 62.45.
62.
So this one's about a foot higher than what we're proposing, and this one was within a tenth of a foot.
Where are you getting 900 cubic yards of fill? And I don't know how many, I'm assuming maybe 20 to 22 cubic yards in a truck. That's 400 trucks?
You mean, where's it coming from? From the site?
Yeah.
It's actually coming from these excavated areas.
So you're not trucking
We don't
400
anticipate,
trucks of fill to this
No.
property?
no.
It's all balanced?
Pardon?
The site is balanced?
Does it balance? No.
Okay.
We may have to haul some out.
Okay.
Okay. But there's not a substantial amount being brought in or being taken out?
Not
Not hundreds of
substantial, no.
trucks.
Not substantial.
Okay.
I guess that's qualified what substantial is, but I'm going to say not substantial.
That's good enough. Wow.
I'd like to, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay, I think it would be helpful to have a foundation plan, you know, for further discussions.
I was going to turn to the proposed structure itself for a minute. Just discuss some elements of that. What style of architecture would you call this?
I would say it's French eclectic.
French eclectic. Okay.
It's obviously unusual because the detached garage obscures, you know, what you would see maybe a more typical front elevation on the lower drawing, which shows a cut through the courtyard section.
What is the square footage of the house? If you were going to do a bulk calculation, a bulk ordinance calculation, I've heard it's 2,200 feet over bulk approximately or something.
If you ignore the lower
maybe
level.
25%. What is the actual bulk square footage of the
It's
structure?
approximately 6,500.
6,500.
Right.
This is a downsize.
Right. Well, that's the bulk, you know, it
Okay.
counts
Right.
the second and third levels.
Okay.
There's 6,600 square feet approximately allowed on the site. And obviously, that, again, like was mentioned, that gives up the panhandle access, so that really is a reduced bulk according to the buildable lot.
And you were asserting earlier that the 2,200 square foot approximate overage to bulk is composed of essentially the crawl space.
Again, right, yes, because, you know, staff informed us of the overage based on their calculation, because the rear of the home, the grade is 3.5 feet lower than the top of finished floor. Up until then, it was our assumption that we were complying. Obviously, with the lower level not being habitable in any way, we did not count it towards the bulk, and we were in compliance up until that point.
Would the petitioner consider reducing 6,500 square feet down to by 2,200 square feet to comply with the bulk ordinance?
I couldn't speak for the owner on that, but
Reducing it by 2,200 square
Yes.
feet?
So we comply with bulk.
I don't know the answer to that. Someone would have to come up with some kind of a plan and propose it.
Right. It might be worth considering. It's gonna, only because it would obviate a very significant issue here.
It's my understanding that that's the square footage that that our client wanted. It's a considerable downsize from what they have now, and that's, they would like the 6,500 square feet.
You are aware that the city perhaps has never approved a variance to bulk on new construction.
That's correct. I think
And certainly not one of this magnitude. This is quite considerable. I'm sure one of my recommendations will be for you to very, very seriously consider some kind of downsizing here to get us all around this problem.
Right. We just felt with the site itself, the restrictions on the site, and it is very different. I don't think you're setting any kind of precedent. I don't think you're going to see another lot come through like this with this situation. And again, I think if you take away the site constraints, and this was a normal house, we wouldn't be making this request.
It's not a normal house, and
Exactly.
it's not a normal lot.
Absolutely
And
right.
there is a bulk ordinance on the books.
And that's why we're here.
This is 2,200. This is not 5% over. This is not 4%
Right.
over. This is 20, according to Kathy, 25% over.
Right.
That's going to be formidable.
Sure. Understand.
Just turning back to the style of the house, we're not, some of us are trained architects. I happen not to be, but I have served on the board for a number of years, and I've seen a lot of designs come down the pike. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, but I've absorbed some
fire away.
some knowledge along the way, and there's some basic principles that I'm sure you're familiar with of architecture: consistency of style, simplicity of massing, hierarchy of massing, simplicity of proportion, symmetry of the face in any event, and some regularity in the appearance of openings, windows and doors, for instance. And it strikes me that on all those counts, this house, or the design I'm looking at, it defies almost every one of those principles. I don't see a very terribly consistent architectural style here. I see French eclectic, I see Tudor. I know they coincided in period, and there are some elements that are drawn from both styles, but I think I'd like to see it truer to one of those types of architectural styles. The massing's all over the place. It's almost square or irregular in shape, and I can't tell what's a primary and a subordinate structure, really. The hierarchy of massing is really, it's almost jarring to the eye. I see these gables at different heights and in different places, and different roof lines and different roof shapes. The proportion seems to be irregular and unbalanced. I don't see a lot of symmetry with window levels and regularity of size in door and window openings or arches. They seem to be very scattered and erratic. So
I think my personal opinion is that this whole design needs to be cleaned up a little bit and perhaps simplified. I certainly don't want to try and design the house for you, but right now I think it's kind of all over the place and it needs to be refined.
Yeah, the massing and the roof lines were especially difficult to accommodate the designs of the owner with, you know, the sort of very odd shape that we're trying to make the house conform to, which led to some, you know, I think some more emphasis placed on the organization. I don't think symmetry is really the right word with this style, but the balance of the front. And then as you get near the floodway, the truncation of the geometry of the home is causing some challenges. That's certainly.
No, I'm not arguing for symmetry all the way around the house. Asymmetrical is an aspect of French eclectic. Sure. You know, it's but nevertheless, there is generally some kind of symmetry on the face of the building that, you know, it doesn't jar the eye.
Sure.
Do you have in your 3D rendering, do you have a shot from the perspective that you would actually have coming down the driveway?
Yeah.
Because you're showing the front face and you're showing it from a higher.
I mean, between the distance and the foliage, you really, obviously, you're not going to perceive the home as part of a streetscape. Not that that's.
No, and I'm not asking for a streetscape. I'm actually asking if you were further down the driveway, what you're going to actually see. What's going to be your perspective of the house itself.
Right, so maybe go to the front of the footbridge, angled in towards the two garages.
If you're able to do that, that would. So now that's your perspective when you, so that would be your approach perspective. Correct. Thank you very much.
Would either of my architect colleagues like to jump in?
I have a question, maybe it's for staff, maybe it's for Lloyd, but I mean, if the big problem here is bulk, and the board is going to say, you know, that's too big of a bulk here, I think we could spend another 3 hours talking about architectural detail here. So I'm curious. I'm curious if it makes sense, since this is a directional meeting, if the decision is this is too big a bulk, we're going to need a drastic reduction, the design's going to have to change. And do we want to hash this out, all the specific architectural details, something that we're just going to reject out of hand anyways, or at least give direction that this is not something we're interested in pursuing? I'll just throw that out. I don't know if that's a question or not, but that I think would save people a lot of time if that's the direction we're headed.
I think that's a very, very good point, Charlie. I think maybe we'll take that issue up when we get to discussion amongst ourselves. Well, I don't know, Kathy, what do you think? This isn't exactly your formal petition procedure.
This is before you for preliminary input. So I think Board Member King's point that it probably isn't worth your time to get into the nitty-gritty detail, the architectural detailing, but to provide some direction. I think one thing staff needs to really know exactly what the bulk is and where the square footage is, because there's some other unusual elements that we weren't sure whether they qualified as design elements or not. So I think we really need to sit down and get thoroughly dimensioned plans so that we can do a full calculation, but certainly having general direction from the board on whether you're looking for something that generally complies with bulk, that absolutely complies with bulk, or whether, depending on the appropriateness of the design, you're willing to have a little bit of latitude given the unique aspects of the site. I think those broader categories would probably be more worth your while this evening.
Mr. Chairman, we did try and come up with some alternatives. We can show those to you if you'd like to see them, if that would help you in terms of your thinking about the project.
Well,
We have them on the tape, we can show.
are you, and I'll take that under consideration, but what I'd ask you is, are you familiar with the conditions for granting a variance to bulk according to the ordinance?
I've read through your conditions, and it
Right.
seemed to me that we could comply with several of them, but we did try and, like I said initially, when we first came to the city, we believed that we complied with everything, because we
Right.
didn't want to have, we know this is an unusual and unique project, we didn't want to have to go to a variance, okay? And then, of course, when this bulk question came up, so much of the bulk is because of the unique design of the inflow and outflow in the crawl space. So we have some thoughts on how we could cure the bulk problem, and, you know, if you'd like to see that here, we're happy to show it to you. I know it's late, we're the last project on the board, and I hate to keep you here longer, but.
So are these downsized projects? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, well,
They're, and we'll show them real quick, and it'll just take a couple minutes. We tried to look at ways that we could comply with the bulk, and that was primarily with the depth of the exposure in the back. We did three very quick, I guess we'd call them exercises, to see if we could actually comply, and we've got those. One of the solutions we thought was just simply to slope up some soil, either one at 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 slope up to the edge of the foundation, just below the 3.5 feet. So in order we could give more bulk to comply, so it would comply. That was one solution.
What happens to the water?
That we would have to deal with that with that water entering and leaving through a pipe or flume system. We didn't like that particularly well. The other one is actually to do a retaining wall so that the soil within the retaining walls would be within the 3.5 feet. I guess that would be, again, open to interpretation as to the bulk too. And I think one more was to do, something, completely in the air. And again, the bulk is still there. Obviously, we didn't like this one either. I think all three of them really don't serve the purpose of the design and help with what it looks like.
Kathy, has staff seen those first two proposals?
I believe that Ms. O'Neill
we talked to her
saw
about
those, but engineering has not reviewed them because we didn't know which direction. We didn't want to take up more engineering time and engineering fees. So the addition of any more soil on this property, we do need to work that through engineering.
Would either of those first two proposals dramatically reduce the bulk?
Well, it's a matter of interpretation. The building scale ordinance does not anticipate that you kind of take these false measures to mitigate the mass, but could an interpretation along those lines, or could that be a basis for at least a variance? I think that would be up to the board.
Are retaining walls such as those presented there, are they calculated in bulk?
Based on the appearance of height on that, it wouldn't be.
What is the height, do you recall? The height that's necessary, or the triggers bulk?
3.5.
3.5?
Here would be the finished floor, and it would be 3.5 feet between here and the grade.
Well, what does the board think of this whole issue?
Well, I'd like to know if those are truly viable alternatives.
Well, I guess so would we. I mean, and that's the question. And
Well, from an engineering standpoint, for
from an
the
engineering
water
standpoint,
situation, are they
I mean,
viable?
from an engineering standpoint, we could make that work. We
Okay.
have to make that work. The
Okay.
volume would have to work. The numbers would have to work.
Okay, so clearly it would be a different design than what you
Right.
had, but
I guess-
it is viable. There is another way to design to take care of the water if you were to do one of these other situations.
Yes.
Are we in question and answer, or are we switching into discussion?
Well, I think we're going to
How do
go a
we-
little off.
Okay. So then
Off
we
the
can go ahead
normal
and offer
protocol
up.
this way, this time. Kathy, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you think that, since this is a directional meeting, should we be inviting public comment or not?
I think if there is public comment, it would be good to hear it now.
Right.
and
Okay, I do too.
There's no harm in that.
Is that all right with you guys? Okay. Is there anybody in the public who would like to testify on this petition? If so, please come forward, identify yourself.
Good evening.
Hello.
Still evening. My name is Kathy Govas. I reside.
I'm sorry, Kathy what?
Kathy Govas.
Okay, Kathy.
I reside at 999 Walden Lane. However, my husband and I recently purchased the one West End Wensia property, which would be on the graph to the east of this proposed home. We are downsizing. We live in 4,800 square feet now in Walden, and purchased that house and are not tearing it down. We just passed for a variance for a very small addition to the east of the house, and it needed a variance because we were going beyond what is the new setback code. Be that as it may, the Normandy compared to Collars, Marin County, Sausalito, we are going to be at 3,000, maybe 3,200 square feet. We purchased this property because it is a beautiful, we also have that long driveway setback, but it's a beautiful piece of property with a very bucolic, lush landscape. I met them last week, and they're lovely people. I never realized that this was the size of the house being proposed adjacent. The drainage is a concern for certain for us, but more importantly, the mass of this house, because there is some landscape area on what would be the west side of our property, the fence that borders this, but not a lot because of the water problem. There's some pines that aren't doing very well. And then there's some, kind of wild growth that adds to the beauty of the landscape. So the mass of this house is a great concern to me. I can't speak for my husband, he's not here tonight, but I never realized that this is what's going to be built next door. Because this will be, if you look at the position of our lot, our house is slightly raised up on the property, but it's that little square right there. This will be our view out of what we just got approved to build, a nice little sunroom, and the height is a real concern to me. Ours is a ranch. It's staying a ranch. We do have a pitched roof, but we're nowhere near the height of these surrounding ones. We don't see the one to what would be the northwest. We do see the one that is directly north of us, but it's existing. It is new construction. It's much larger than our house certainly is, and even the one to the west in height, and it's ornate, but it's there. But to have this height in our backyard, we do not live in the home. We are going to be remodeling it come spring. We've winterized it now. But that would be of concern to me. So in your consideration, as far as the bulk and the height, as a new owner adjacent, I would love to put in my 2 cents as far as that's concerned. Otherwise, I have no problem with the house being built next door. I mean, that's not within our control. But certainly what we look at, I would hope the city would have some say as to what goes in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goldie.
I'm Greg Strauss, I live at 50 West Honeysuckle Road. Essentially, I'm on the board of Owensia Gardens, which is the development that is just west of the creek. Where the house is being positioned, obviously we're talking about moving a tremendous amount of water and water management, and they were talking about pumping that back into the creek. As staff has alluded to, the 100-year floods seem to come every 2 years as of late, in the last 6 to 8 years. One of the issues is this open land area
that's purposely created here for Owencia Gardens, just to the west. It affects 7 homes. Now, that area does tend to fill with water when that creek rises. There's a significant drainage vehicle from that open land area to the creek. With the rains that happen frequently, with all the building that's happened north of that creek, more and more water is draining to it, and so now there's drainage issues during those times where this retention area is more really just, which never really filled up with water, is now filling up with water during high rains. The way the property is positioned with their collection area, their compensatory drainage area, at the northwest portion of the property, they're planning to then push that or pipe that through gravity fed down into the creek. And obviously the issue is south of where that plan is created, you can see right about where on the left side of the creek there's a couple little markings there. That's about where the drainage tube for the Owencia Gardens properties are. That's obviously downstream, so now we're looking at pumping a tremendous amount of extra water during heavy rain into an area that's surrounded by 7 fairly large homes. The majority of the homes are probably in the 4,000, a little bit less than 4,000 square foot homes. So again, we're talking about a very large home with a very large amount of water that's going to be displaced at an inopportune site to 7 homes, not to mention some of the other homes downstream within Owencia Gardens. So that's a pretty significant concern for the association. Additionally, the 2,200 square foot variance is fairly large and probably as large as many of the homes in town itself. So I don't think that there's an objection with the home. I think the size is very large. It's more about the displacement of the water on a natural land now. It's been vacant, it's been absorbing the water, and now all that water is going to be pushed back into a creek that's already taxed. And the vegetation and the trees, you know, the association clearly doesn't want to see another building, and the new home clearly doesn't want to see the association homes. So we'd like to see that as much of that natural vegetation and with trees that would shade that area, shade the home would still be in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stearns. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the board? Seeing no one, I'm not sure if you'd like to respond to any of that testimony.
Right. Two points. First, I'll raise one, and then I'd ask Mr. Christensen to raise the other. As to the water, I believe you've heard it said tonight that we're actually keeping more water on the site after we get done with this project. So, you know, we're improving the situation in the case of a flood, not making it worse. And then, and I appreciate, of course, the neighbors coming and raising these points. We've tried to think ahead about these things. And then, as to the view from the neighbor's lot, perhaps Glenn, if you would talk about the landscape.
The darker circles here represent the new landscaping. The lighter, as I mentioned before, the lighter circles are the existing landscaping that's going to remain here on the periphery, and new landscaping that's going to be added. We're going to add a significant number of trees here that'll help break the line of sight and help break that view from the neighbor's property to the east. And there's some considerable, as she mentioned, some plant material along the fence line now too. So I think with the additional landscaping that they'll break that line up pretty well.
Thank you. I think now we will take it to discussion amongst ourselves. I think I'll start because I think Charlie made an excellent point. I think that we ought to clarify the bulk issue amongst ourselves and decide whether that is something that we would recommend to these folks that they seriously address before we get too deep into design detail. Is that a fair
Yes.
assessment?
Yes.
If there do exist alternatives to address the bulk issue, then those should definitely be,
How do we feel
pursued.
about a 2,200 square foot, approximate 25% variance to bulk? Is that something that we
Well, I
would
think
consider?
it's more
Is it something
complicated
that's-
than that, though.
Or would we say that?
I'd say absolutely not on my part. I appreciate the amount of effort that went into this presentation, and this family's tried to do something very unique here. The fact that they've done this with a driveway, for instance, doing an impervious driveway. I mean, they're trying here, but the problem is the sheer mass of that. I can't in good conscience approve anything even close to that. And given the history here of not a new construction, not really proving any bulk, I'd personally say that I'm not going to prove anything that's a bulk, even by a foot. That's just where I am.
And I think that it is such a sensitive site, and the whole team really just needs to work with that site and create a new home that is within bulk. I mean, if that means the mass of it has to be smaller because of the grading, I just think that that is something that we need to see, you know. So I could see that, you know, perhaps there could be a little bit of a over bulk for portions of it if something of the aesthetics made it absolutely necessary. But with this home as it is, I just don't see it, because it's just too much home for the site right now, and I'm just not willing to go that far above bulk.
Peggy, do you have a different point of view? Or
no,
is that-
as I said before, I think if there are alternatives, then they should be pursued to get within bulk.
Maddie?
At the risk of being repetitive, I agree with everything that's already been said.
And John?
Yeah, I agree, about, you know, recognizing that this is a challenging lot, factoring in the fact that, as Kathy pointed out today, this would not be a buildable lot, period. That doesn't discount the fact that when they bought it 18 years ago, that it was presented to them as a buildable lot. So I'm trying to you know, not be a devil's advocate, but I'm trying to look at both sides of this coin. I do agree that they've gone to extremes to deal with the water, and they're dealing with it. They're not delivering it to the neighborhood.
I'm trying
but
to
that's
focus
the bulk
in on
issue.
bulk
The
right
bulk
now.
issue. I'm getting to that. You know, having said all of that, you know, the bulk issue, the rationale is, well, we have to elevate it out of the ground because of the grading and the FEMA and all that, because now this calculation of basement, but then they're showing alternatives to this that do satisfy that.
Well,
so if we're truly
perhaps.
looking, well, it's going to have the aesthetic issue delivered with that, or other issues, but you know, looking at this whole thing and the fact that they are downsizing, the fact that they do have steep 12-12 roof pitches, and that there's a lot of two-story walls and
I think
complicated building structure to impact the neighborhood. It does impact. It is big. It is over bulk. It does have its circumstances of why, but that still doesn't suggest that they can't build a house on this lot and meet bulk. So the long and short of it is, it should meet bulk.
I mean, I think if the lot allows, if it's a 4,000 square foot buildable, you know, amount that you can build, that's what the house should be built towards. You know, I mean, if the dream was to have 6,500 square foot, that's just not what this lot allows.
Right.
I think that's what you're going to hear loud and clear from this board.
Could I ask one question? If I could. Well, those alternatives that we did rather quickly and talked to staff with, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons why we were here for discussions were to see whether those alternatives would be.
You know, without a formal bulk calculation and the staff input on
Okay.
whether those are
Well, it's-
legitimate design aspects or some kind of, Potemkin way of,
And that is the question. I think we could go back and we could do those alternatives and make the
Yeah, and I don't think any of us here want you to be a hamster on a treadmill here.
Right.
We don't want to spin your wheels. I might suggest that you work with staff along those lines and try and get a preliminary indication from them as to whether or not this is a legitimate approach to circumventing the bulk issue. But I think what you're going to hear from this board loud and clear is that we are not readily going to, if at all, grant a variance to bulk of any kind with respect to this petition. And, that will either entail, that will entail some kind of redesign.
Sure. Okay.
Is that,
Yes.
does my members agree with that
Yep.
petition?
You're right on.
I would also submit that, if we get to the next step, that there will probably be some design issues as well that this board will want to address. But as Charlie points out, and I think we all agree, we don't want to spin our wheels or yours until we can get over this barrier. So.
In terms of process, would we just go on as a continuation to perhaps the next meeting? I assume you have one in December.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Back
I
to
might
4 days
ask,
at a time?
I might ask staff for some guidance as to what the a possible process there, but the normal approach is to continue a petition and give you the opportunity to digest what we've discussed here this evening.
And let me just say thank you for work. This is a unique situation, and you guys have done a great job tonight, and I know time goes on, but thanks for your input.
Well, thank you. We've been, the staff has indicated to us, it's a buildable site. And, there's been some engineering approval, both at the city level and at the FEMA level. So I don't think anybody here is determined to kill the project, but I think we are determined to stay within the bounds of the ordinance.
We came here for your input, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies. The next item on the agenda is an opportunity for the public to address the board on non-agenda items. Is there anybody in the public who wishes to do so? Not seeing anybody step forward. I would ask if there's any additional information that staff would like to offer this evening.
Nothing further.
In that case, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.